My name is Gloria, and I'm 33 years old. 2 years ago, I married my husband, Andy. We live together in an apartment and share the household chores. I once believed we could have a happy married life, but after the wedding, reality fell short of my expectations. I anticipated that Andy and I would have different values but would gradually adjust to each other's perspectives. However, the real issue turned out to be my mother-in-law. It started during the first month of our marriage. One morning, as I was heading out to work, my mother-in-law unexpectedly showed up at our home. She asked me, "What are you doing up so early? Where are you going, Gloria?" When I told her I was going to work, she looked at me in disbelief and said, "You're married now. What are you thinking? Go back to bed." Her reaction stunned me. Instead of offering any support, Andy said, "I'm going to be late for work. See you later," and left me to handle the situation alone. I was at a loss but told my mother-in-law that I needed to go to work too. She responded with, "Are you serious? You're a wife now. Your duty is to stay at home and support your husband. Trust him to take care of things." She blocked my path at the door, continuously interrupting me as I tried to leave. I said, "I'm sorry, but I really have to go. Please just use the key and put it in the mailbox when you leave." Reluctantly, she took the key, and I managed to get to work. However, I made a mistake by allowing her to stay in our home that day. When I returned from work, my mother-in-law was still there. As soon as I walked in, she ordered me to sit down. With a stern look, she began lecturing me on what a wife should be like, repeating the same old values. Andy arrived home midway through the lecture, but by then, the damage had already been done. She made Andy sit down too and said, "You're the husband, so show some dignity. If your wife does whatever she wants, your family will fall apart." Andy kept apologizing to his mother, and I couldn't understand why he was so weak when it came to her. Times have changed, and my mother-in-law's old-fashioned values are her own. They don't concern us. Yet she showed up early in the morning, interfering in our lives, and even wanted me to quit my job. There was no reason for me to obey her, but it made me uncomfortable that Andy would always do as she said. After my mother-in-law left, I complained to Andy. "Why do you always listen to your mother? She's just forcing her idea of a perfect family on us. It's not right to be controlled like this." But Andy seemed to have always been weak against his mother. "I'm sorry, but I can't resist if she insists. Can't you just do what Mom says, just this once?" "That's impossible. You know how important my job is. Next time your mother comes over, I won't let her into the house." "No, you can't do that. Mom will get angry and blame me for not being able to control my wife." Andy's words made me angry again. "But it's true, isn't it? We're in this mess because you never stand up to your mother. Can you at least talk to your father and get him to make her stop?" "But Mom doesn't listen to Dad either, so..." "See, don't you see that your mother is full of contradictions? She said that if a wife does whatever she wants, the family will fall apart. But I thought to myself, she's the one actually causing the family to break down." When I said that, my husband got upset and glared at me, which was rare for him. "Don't speak badly about my mom," he said. I replied, "If you can stand up to me like that, I hope you'll show some strength in front of your mother too." But I knew it was my choice to marry Andy, and despite everything, I still loved him. So I decided to try harder to get along with my mother-in-law. Before Andy, all my previous boyfriends were bossy and controlling. I had many bad experiences with them. That's why I thought Andy, who was quiet and gentle, would make me happy. But in reality, he was too passive and unreliable, which became a problem. Still, I believed I could change the situation if I put in the effort. Since then, I've been trying to do both my housework and job perfectly. Yet my mother-in-law would still come over and complain, saying things like, "Aren't you neglecting the housework because you're working?" One day, I asked her to look around the house and said, "What do you think? I'm doing a good job with the housework, aren't I? Is there anything more I need to do?" She made a frustrated face and replied, "Isn't Andy helping you?" She then glared at Andy, and he turned pale, shaking his head quickly. He has never lied to his mother, so she believes everything he says. In reality, I do make Andy help with the housework, but we keep it a secret from her. My mother-in-law doesn't seem to notice at all. However, when we first got married, Andy didn't know how to do any housework at all. So I took it upon myself to teach Andy how to do housework. As my mother-in-law put on her shoes to leave, she said in frustration, "Even if it's fine now, it won't last. I'll get proof, I swear. I thought to myself, she's so persistent. I planned to just continue with our way of doing things. But my mother-in-law still showed up randomly every week, being a constant nuisance. Hey, this corner is too dusty. See, I knew it. You're not doing enough housework because you're working. Quit your job and take care of the house. This went on for 2 years. To be honest, I was getting tired of this marriage. It was stressful having her come over to check on the housework, rummaging through the fridge and even the wardrobe. It was driving me crazy. One day, she came over as usual and started going through the fridge. What? You don't have anything in here. You can't even cook a decent meal for Andy. Quit your job already. Just then, Andy came home, carrying big shopping bags in both hands. The timing couldn't have been worse. My mother-in-law was shocked to see him and immediately made a fuss. My God, Gloria, what were you thinking? Making your husband help with the housework? I replied, with all due respect, this is normal nowadays. Families with old-fashioned ideas like yours are becoming less common. My mother-in-law's face turned red, and she started yelling, You do whatever you want and mess everything up. It's disgusting. And you too, Andy. Why do you let her do this? Man up. Andy's face turned pale. He put the shopping bags on the floor, rolled his shoulders, and stayed silent. I thought to myself, he really is a pathetic guy. Then I finally spoke back to my mother-in-law in a firm tone. I've been thinking about this for a long time, but isn't this behavior rude? Andy and I are equals in this marriage. We treat each other with respect and have decided not to put the burden on either side. And I will continue to work, even if we have children. So I taught Andy how to do housework myself. As my mother-in-law was putting on her shoes to leave, she said in frustration, Even if things are okay now, it won't last. I'll find proof, I swear. I thought, she's so persistent. I was ready to continue our way, but my mother-in-law kept showing up at random times each week, being a real nuisance. Hey, this corner is too dusty. I knew it. You're not doing enough housework because you're working. Quit your job and take care of the house. This continued for 2 years, and honestly, I was getting fed up with the marriage. It was stressful having her come over, check the housework, and even go through the fridge and wardrobe. I wondered how much more of this I could take. One day, she came over and started rummaging through the fridge. What? You don't have anything in here. You can't even cook a decent meal for Andy. Quit your job already. Just then, Andy came home with big shopping bags in each hand. The timing was terrible. My mother-in-law was shocked to see him and started making a fuss. My God, Gloria, what were you thinking? Making your husband help with the housework? I replied, with all due respect, this is normal nowadays. Families with old-fashioned ideas like yours are becoming less common. Her face turned red, and she yelled, You do whatever you want and mess everything up. Disgusting. And you too, Andy. Why do you let her do this? Man up. Andy turned pale, put the shopping bags on the floor, rolled his shoulders, and stayed silent. I thought, he really is pathetic. I then spoke back to my mother-in-law with a strong tone. I've been thinking about this for a long time, but isn't this behavior rude? Andy and I are equals in this marriage. We treat each other with respect and have decided not to place the burden on either side. I will continue to work, even if we have children. Then, with a blank expression on my face, I told her the truth. I'm going back to work after my maternity leave. What? She said, shocked. You're not just saying that to surprise me, are you? No, I'm not. Also, after I return to work, Andy is going to quit his job. We've decided that he will become a full-time stay-at-home father. Huh? What nonsense are you talking about? You're a mother, and you don't want to raise your own children. Well, my income is higher than Andy's. Of course, I'll support him while I work. We both agreed that it would be better for our children. At that moment, my mother-in-law began to tremble. She turned to me, her face filled with anger like I had never seen before. Impossible. That's unforgivable. I didn't raise Andy to be unhappy. I will make sure he divorces you for sure, she shouted before storming out of the apartment as if she were running away. When Andy came home from work, he had a grim look on his face. Mom was so annoying. She called me while I was at work, saying what we decided was wrong. I don't know what she'll do. She might do something crazy. Gloria, why don't you go back to your parents' house for a while and have the twins there? It was rare for Andy to suggest something, even when he proposed to me. I remember how he showed me the engagement ring while trembling and couldn't even say, "Will you marry me?" I appreciated his kindness and courage, so I agreed. "All right, I'll take your advice and do that." I told my parents about the situation and decided to have the babies in my hometown. While I was there, I called Andy every day. I remember the time when Andy and I were dating. We didn't see each other very often, so we used to call each other just like this. Now, even though things were tense, hearing his voice brought back those memories. My mother-in-law was still furious and even showed up with divorce papers. But Andy reassured her that he would never divorce me. He even made another suggestion that helped me feel more at ease. It was an incredibly tough time, but Andy held my hand and kept my spirits up the whole way. Eventually, I gave birth to our baby girls. Andy stayed at my parents' house with me until things settled down. After a while, he returned to our apartment on his own. Not long after, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law. "Hello, Gloria. Only Andy came back, and he didn't say anything about you. You're not planning to come back here, are you?" she asked, clearly irritated. "I'm coming home tomorrow with the babies," I replied. "No, don't come back. I don't want to see your face. You and Andy are getting a divorce anyway. Why don't you just stay with your parents? Andy went there to talk about the divorce, right?" she said, sounding excited. I chuckled and responded, "Please don't worry, but I don't think Andy will be seeing you anymore." There was a brief pause before she replied, "What? What are you talking about? Haven't you heard from Andy? It means that you and Andy are no longer mother and son." He went back to the apartment first to pack. "We're moving out tomorrow." "Haven't you noticed any moving boxes?" "No, I haven't seen anything like that. The room looks clean, but that's because Andy worked so hard to clean it," she said, sounding confused. Then I faintly heard Andy's voice in the background, as if the call was on speaker. His voice became clearer. "Sorry, Gloria. I didn't expect Mom to call you." "It's okay, don't worry about it," I said. "How's the packing going?" "Yeah, almost done. I thought it would be troublesome if Mom came and made a fuss," he replied. "So I sealed the boxes and closed them up." "Wow, that's great," I said. "I'm sorry I made you do all that." As we were talking, my mother-in-law suddenly started yelling. "What the hell are you talking about? Andy, don't tell me you're moving and cutting ties with me." I was about to explain when Andy interrupted. "No, you shut up, Mom. I've had enough. All you do is impose your own rules on us, and you don't realize how much trouble you're causing. I'm sick of it. That's why we've decided to cut ties with you. And when did you even make a duplicate key without our permission? Give it to me so I can return it to the management company." Andy's words stunned his mother. "What, Andy? You're divorcing Gloria, and now you're saying this to me?" "Divorce? I never said I'm divorcing Gloria. She earns more than me, and she's already explained that if she became a housewife, we couldn't have a stable family. The girls would have to sacrifice too much." My mother-in-law, still in shock, replied, "But it's just one income. Gloria's father and brother may run a company, but what does that have to do with her?" I finally spoke up, "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd make a big fuss. I work for my brother's company. He's starting another business soon, and I'm supposed to take over his company." "Huh? You mean a woman will be the president?" she asked, incredulous. "Yes, the president," I confirmed. "But for now, I'm more focused on supporting the company. I'll return to work after my maternity leave. I think we've talked about this before, I had told her this during our wedding planning, but it seemed she had forgotten. My mother-in-law was stunned into silence and didn't know how to respond for a long time. Then Andy spoke up. "Oh, by the way, Barry works for Gloria's brother's company. With your attitude, what do you think will happen to him?" Barry is Andy's second brother and a sales manager at my brother's company. I had met Barry at the wedding and found out he was Andy's brother. My mother-in-law's voice trembled as she said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please don't fire Barry. He's struggling with 3 kids right now." I almost laughed. "No, I can't just fire an employee because of a threat. But really, please stop interfering in our family." "Well, we're cutting ties with you anyway, so it doesn't matter," she said, still ranting. Barry seemed to have forcefully ended the call. The next day, my parents dropped me off at our new house with the twins. The movers had already finished setting up the furniture and unpacking the boxes, and my parents helped organize everything. Shortly after, my father-in-law arrived. After Andy cut off contact with my mother-in-law, my father-in-law decided to distance himself from her as well. My mother-in-law's old-fashioned values had affected not just Andy but also my father-in-law and his two brothers. It seemed the entire family was dealing with the fallout just as we were. Andy, who had always been the quietest and most obedient to his mother, finally stood up to her. One by one, the sons declared their separation from her. My father-in-law also left the house and is now preparing for divorce with a lawyer. My mother-in-law has been abandoned by all her family members. Andy quit his job and has been dedicated to taking care of the twins, while I continue to work hard every day. Considering our children's future expenses, it's better for me to work than for Andy to. No matter what anyone says, I will respect the decision Andy and I made as a couple. We are committed to building our own happy family. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you liked the video. See you in the next one. Thank you.
I never thought my world would crumble in the dead of night, in our own garage. The scene before me was like a twisted nightmare. There, entangled in the backseat of our family car, were Ethan and Grace, my husband and sister. The pain of betrayal struck me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. My name is Ava Carter, a 28-year-old nurse, married to the man I thought was the love of my life. Ethan was my high school classmate, someone I barely knew back then, but when he re-entered my life years later, he came as a whirlwind romance that I naively believed was fate. Our love is real, Ava, Ethan's words echoed in my mind, now a cruel joke in the face of his betrayal. Our love story began innocently enough. Ethan approached me after graduation, his charm and attentiveness sweeping me off my feet. He was the popular guy in school, the kind that every girl dreamed of. But me? I was just Ava, the quiet one. His interest in me was baffling, yet intoxicating. Why me? I had asked him once, my insecurities surfacing. Because I fell in love, he replied, his gaze holding mine, convincing and sincere. Or so I thought. The doubt I carried was partly due to my sister, Grace. Beautiful, outgoing, and the polar opposite of me. She was the one who always shone, effortlessly attracting attention. When I turned to her for advice about Ethan, her words were encouraging, yet somehow patronizing. He's serious about you. Who would chase a girl for months for a fling? She had said, her words tinted with a hint of condescension. I wanted to believe her, to believe that someone could truly love me for me. Ethan's kindness in our first year together only solidified my trust. He was the perfect boyfriend, showering me with attention and surprises. Every anniversary, every birthday was a celebration of our love. But after we got married, everything changed. Can't you at least help with the cleaning? It's your house too, I pleaded with Ethan on countless occasions. He earned less than me, spending most of his time idly while I worked exhausting shifts at the hospital. But he shrugged off my requests, his once sweet words turning into sharp retorts. You're the one who's good at it, he'd say, his voice laced with annoyance. The emotional toll was immense. My once fairy tale romance had turned into a draining, one-sided relationship. Ethan's transformation from a loving partner to a freeloader was gradual but relentless. The worst part? I started believing that maybe it was my fault, that maybe I wasn't enough. That night, the night I caught them, was supposed to be like any other. I woke up to find Ethan's side of the bed cold and empty. A sense of unease led me to the garage, where I heard them before I saw them. The sight of Ethan and Grace together shattered any illusions I had left. Be gentle, Ethan, Grace's voice was a whisper, but to me it was a scream that tore through my heart. I stood there, frozen, as the truth revealed itself in the most horrifying way. They didn't see me. They were too lost in their own world of deceit. I closed the garage quietly, locking them in their den of betrayal. Rushing to my parents' house, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief. My parents and Mark, Grace's unsuspecting husband, were waiting, their expressions grim. Mark held a recording device in his hand, and the voices of Ethan and Grace filled the room, discussing their affair with a casual cruelty that made my skin crawl. I knew then what I had to do. Revenge was the only path left for me. I wanted them to feel the pain they inflicted, to understand the depth of their betrayal, and I was ready to do whatever it took to make that happen. Let's make them pay, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. And so the plan for retribution began. As the sun peeked through the curtains the next morning, my resolve hardened. The man I had loved, Ethan, was nothing but a mask, and Grace, my sister, a serpent in disguise. I replayed their secret conversations, each word a dagger to my heart. "You're just too good at this, Ethan." Grace's voice from the recording mocked me. Ethan's laughter followed. "Only for you, Grace." The memories of our relationship, once sweet, now turned bitter. Ethan and I had started as friends, and his pursuit seemed so genuine. He was the popular one, the golden boy, while I remained in the background, unnoticed. His sudden interest in me was like a dream come true. I was flattered, overwhelmed, and eventually in love. "Why me?" I had asked him more than once. "Because you're different, Ava. You're real," Ethan had said, looking into my eyes with such intensity that I believed him. That belief was my downfall. But Grace, she was the epitome of confidence and allure. She had always been the center of attention, effortlessly stealing the spotlight. When Ethan came into my life, her advice was laced with subtle jabs, undermining my self-esteem while pretending to be supportive. "Take a chance, Ava. Ethan seems different," she urged, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I remembered how Ethan's behavior started changing after our marriage. The sweet gestures and thoughtful surprises became rarer, replaced by indifference and neglect. I was left to manage everything, from household chores to finances, while Ethan lounged around, his job at his father's company more of a time pass than a career. "We need to support each other, Ethan. Can't you see I'm struggling?" I had pleaded with him countless times. "You knew I wasn't the domestic type," was his cold reply. My efforts to involve him in our life were met with resistance and anger. His once loving words turned into harsh criticisms, his hands, once gentle, now raised in threat. I remembered the fear, the sense of walking on eggshells around my own husband. "You're better off doing it yourself. You don't want me to mess it up, do you?" Ethan's words were a constant reminder of my supposed inadequacy. The realization that it was all a charade to get close to Grace hit me like a tidal wave. Their affair wasn't just a fleeting moment of weakness. It was planned, nurtured in deceit. They used my love, my trust, as a stepping stone for their sordid affair. Grace's words from the recording played in my mind. "I've always admired how easily you manipulate, Ethan." His response was a chilling confession. "And I admire your ability to play the innocent sister." The plan for revenge took shape in my mind, clear and precise. I couldn't let them get away with their treachery. They needed to understand the pain they had caused, the lives they had shattered. It was time for their facade of love to come crashing down. "I will make them regret every lie, every deceit," I whispered to myself, a vow that I intended to keep. The morning light did nothing to ease the storm inside me. As I sat with Mark, my parents, and the recording, a plan began to take shape. It was more than just a need for revenge. It was a quest for justice, for exposing the lies that Ethan and Grace had woven so skillfully. "Did you know about this, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I had my suspicions," Mark confessed, his eyes dark with pain, "but I never imagined the depth of their betrayal." My parents, always supportive, looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We're here for you, Ava, whatever you need," my father said, his voice firm. It was a surreal moment, hearing the supportive words of my family while grappling with the betrayal of those I had loved. Ethan's true nature was a bitter pill to swallow. He was no longer the man I married, but a stranger with a charming facade. Our anniversary, it was all a lie, wasn't it? The words tumbled out of me, a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "He never cared about the marriage, Ava. It was all a game to him." Mark's voice was heavy with unspoken emotions. The conversation shifted to the specifics of our revenge. It had to be meticulous, leaving no room for Ethan and Grace to escape the consequences of their actions. "We need to hit them where it hurts the most," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Financially and socially," Mark added, his mind already strategizing. The plan was simple yet effective. We would use the evidence of the affair to ruin their reputation. Ethan's job at his father's company would be the first target. With the recording and my testimony, it would be easy to convince his father of Ethan's true character. "Grace won't get away with this either," I said, a cold determination settling over me. Mark nodded. "I'll file for divorce and make sure she doesn't get a penny." The thought of confronting them was both terrifying and exhilarating. I wanted to see the shock on their faces when they realized their world was crumbling. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain they had caused me. "Let's do it. Let's bring them down," I declared, my voice filled with a newfound strength. My parents agreed, their support unwavering. "We'll stand by you, Ava, always," my mother said, her eyes glistening with tears. The meeting ended with a plan in place. It was time for Ethan and Grace to face the consequences of their actions. They thought they could use me and get away with it. They were wrong. I would make sure of that. The day unfolded with a tense anticipation. I waited for the moment when Ethan and Grace would realize their carefully constructed world of lies was about to collapse. My heart raced with a mix of fear and vindictive satisfaction. In the late afternoon, the confrontation took place. Ethan and Grace, looking disheveled and confused after being released from the garage, were summoned to my parents' house. They walked in, not knowing that their lives were about to change irrevocably. "What the hell, Ava? Why did you lock us in there?" Ethan's voice was filled with anger and confusion. Grace added, her voice dripping with feigned innocence, "Ava, we were worried sick about you. Why did you run off like that?" Their acting was almost convincing, but I knew better. "You're worried about me? That's rich, coming from you two," I replied, my voice cold and unwavering. Mark stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We know about the affair. All of it." Ethan and Grace exchanged a panicked look, their masks of concern quickly dissolving. "You have no proof," Ethan blurted out, his voice betraying his fear. "That's where you're wrong," Mark said, pulling out the recording device. The voices of Ethan and Grace filled the room, their intimate conversation echoing off the walls. The color drained from their faces as they listened to their own words, their affair laid bare for all to hear. This is illegal. You can't record us like that." Grace stammered, her composure shattered. I stepped closer, my anger boiling over. "You think that matters now, after everything you've done? You used me, Ethan. You used our marriage to get to my sister. And you, Grace, how could you do this to me? To Mark?" My voice was a mixture of rage and heartache. Ethan's defiance crumbled, replaced by a desperate plea. "Ava, please, I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." "And you, Grace? What's your excuse?" I demanded, my gaze fixed on her. Grace's eyes darted around the room, seeking an ally, finding none. "It was a mistake, Ava. I never meant to hurt you." "A mistake? You call an ongoing affair a mistake?" My words were sharp, cutting through the room. Mark intervened, his voice calm but firm. "The marriage is over, Grace. I've already filed for divorce. And as for you, Ethan, your father will know about this. I doubt he'll want a son-in-law who cheats on his daughter with her own sister." Ethan's face went pale, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. Grace began to sob, her tears failing to elicit sympathy from anyone in the room. "You two deserve each other," I said, the finality in my voice marking the end of the chapter that had been Ethan and Grace in my life. As they left, their pleas and cries echoing behind them, I felt a sense of closure. The path ahead would be challenging, but at least it would be free from their deceit. The revenge was just beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The aftermath of the confrontation left a bitter taste in my mouth. Ethan and Grace had left, their facades of innocence shattered. But it wasn't enough. The depth of their betrayal demanded more than just a revelation. It required retribution. Sitting around the dining table with Mark and my parents, we plotted our next moves. The air was thick with a sense of righteous anger, a collective desire to see justice served. "We need to ensure they truly understand the consequences of their actions," Mark said, his voice resolute. I nodded in agreement. "They can't just walk away from this unscathed." My father, usually a man of few words, spoke up. "Ethan's employment at his father's company is his lifeline. If he loses that, he loses everything." A plan began to form, one that involved not just exposing Ethan's infidelity to his family, but also highlighting his manipulative nature. His father, a respected businessman, would not tolerate such a scandal. "And what about Grace?" my mother asked, her voice tinged with disappointment and disgust for her own daughter. "Her social standing, her lifestyle, it all hinges on her marriage to Mark," I said. "Once the divorce is finalized and the details of her infidelity become public, she'll lose it all." Mark nodded. "I'll make sure the divorce settlement leaves her with nothing. She won't be able to charm her way out of this." The conversation turned to the logistics of our plan. Mark had contacts who could expedite the divorce and ensure the affair was made public. My father knew people in the business community who would ensure Ethan's disgrace was well known. It was a meticulous plan, cold and calculated, but it was justified. Ethan and Grace had played with our lives, and now they would face the repercussions. "Are you sure about this, Ava?" my mother asked, concern in her eyes. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "They need to learn that actions have consequences. They can't just use people and expect to get away with it." As we finalized our plan, I felt a sense of empowerment. For too long, I had been the victim of their deceit, but now I was taking control. Ethan and Grace would soon learn the true cost of their betrayal, and I would be there to witness their fall. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as our plan was set into motion. Mark, with his connections, expedited the divorce proceedings and ensured that the details of Grace's infidelity became public knowledge. The reaction was immediate and scathing. Grace, once a social butterfly, found herself ostracized, her friends turning their backs on her in disgust. Meanwhile, my father used his influence to spread the word about Ethan's behavior. Soon enough, the scandal reached his father's ears. The disappointment and anger in his father's voice were palpable when he called Ethan for a meeting. "I cannot believe you would stoop so low, Ethan," his father had said, according to what I heard later. "You have not only shamed yourself, but our entire family." Ethan's pleas fell on deaf ears. His father, a man of principles, could not overlook such a grave transgression. Ethan was promptly removed from his position in the company, his future in tatters. As for Grace, the reality of her situation hit her hard. The luxurious life she had enjoyed was slipping through her fingers like sand. Her husband, whom she had deceived, was now her ex-husband, and he made sure she left the marriage with nothing but her personal belongings. The day of reckoning came when I encountered Ethan and Grace together, looking defeated and desperate. They had come, hoping for some form of forgiveness, a chance to explain themselves. "Ava, please, you have to understand," Ethan began, his voice trembling. "You don't get to ask for understanding, Ethan. Not after everything you've done." I cut him off, my voice cold and unyielding. Grace was next, her eyes brimming with tears. "Ava, I'm your sister. Please, can't we just talk about this?" "You ceased to be my sister the moment you betrayed me," I said, the finality in my voice leaving no room for argument. They tried to plead, to reason, but it was useless. The damage was done, their actions irredeemable. They had played a dangerous game and lost everything. "You both made your choices, and now you have to live with them," I said, turning away from their pleas. As I walked away, leaving them behind, I felt a sense of closure. The weight of their betrayal would no longer hold me down. They had received their due punishment, and I could finally move on. Ethan and Grace had thought they could manipulate those around them without consequence. But they were wrong. They learned the hard way that deceit and treachery come at a price they would now pay for the rest of their lives. In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle. Ethan and Grace, now pariahs, faced the harsh reality of their choices. Their fall from grace was a tale whispered in hushed tones among our acquaintances, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal and deceit. Meanwhile, I found myself in a period of reflection. The intense emotions that had fueled my desire for revenge gave way to a quiet introspection. I had sought justice, and in many ways I had achieved it. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. There was no joy in seeing the downfall of people I once loved, only a profound sense of loss and a desire to move forward. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of purpose it brought. My colleagues noticed the change in me, a newfound strength and resilience that had emerged from the ashes of my old life. One day, after a particularly grueling shift, I sat down with a close friend and coworker, Lisa, who had been a pillar of support through everything. "You look different, Ava. Stronger," she commented, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and admiration. "I had to be," I replied, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "I couldn't let them destroy me." Lisa nodded, understanding. "And now, what's next for Ava Carter?" I smiled, a genuine smile that had been absent for too long. "I start living for myself. I rebuild, but this time on my own terms." The path to healing wasn't straightforward. There were days when anger and sadness threatened to overwhelm me, but with each passing day they became less potent. I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had lost in my marriage, my independence, my strength, and my capacity for joy. Months passed, and life found a new rhythm. Ethan and Grace became distant memories, occasional whispers in the wind that no longer had the power to hurt me. My relationship with my parents and Mark grew stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. We had faced a storm together, and it had brought us closer. As for love, I was cautious. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they were healing. I knew that someday I would be ready to open my heart again, but for now, I was content in finding peace within myself. Sitting in the park one sunny afternoon, watching the world go by, I realized that I had come a long way. The journey had been painful, filled with trials and tribulations, but it had led me to a place of understanding and acceptance. I had learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, was not a path to true happiness. True strength lay in forgiveness, in the ability to let go of the past and embrace the future. As I looked up at the clear blue sky, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that the best was yet to come. The past could not be changed, but the future was mine to write. And with that thought, I stood up, ready to face whatever life had in store for me, with a heart that was healing and a spirit that was unbroken. The room was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken truths and veiled accusations. I stood across from Marcus, my husband of 5 years, the man who once promised to be my rock, now the source of my deepest turmoil. "Marcus, we need to talk about your mother, Helena," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. He sighed, a dismissive sound that had become all too familiar. "Evelyn, can we not do this now? I've had a long day." "This can't wait," I insisted. "Every time we visit your parents, your mother corners me about why we haven't had kids yet. You know why, Marcus. You said you didn't want them, but to her, I'm always the one at fault." Marcus avoided my gaze, focusing on a spot just past my shoulder. "You know how she is, Evelyn. Just let it go." "Let it go?" My voice rose, a mixture of frustration and disbelief coloring my words. "I can't keep being the scapegoat for a decision we both made." He finally looked at me, his expression an unsettling blend of annoyance and detachment. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. She's just being a mother. You wouldn't understand." That stung. I wouldn't understand? Because I don't have children or because I don't work anymore? The memory of my old job as a marketing consultant flashed in my mind. I had left it at 32, plagued by health issues exacerbated by stress. Now 35, I was healthier, but trapped in a different kind of stress, one that Marcus seemed oblivious to. "Look, I don't want to argue," Marcus said, his tone dismissive. "Can't you just handle it? It's what you're good at." Handle it? Those words echoed in my mind. That's all I had been doing since we got married, handling things. His indifference, his mother's invasive comments, the weight of unspoken expectations. I realized then that the man I married, the one who used to appreciate my presence, who used to say he was lucky to have me, had changed. Or perhaps he had always been this way, and I was just now seeing it. The revelation was as painful as it was liberating. I was not the woman Marcus or Helena thought I was, a mere fixture in their perfectly constructed world. I was Evelyn, and it was time they both remembered that. "Fine, Marcus," I said calmly, "I'll handle it. But remember, every action has its consequences." As I walked away, leaving him in his uncomfortable silence, I felt a flicker of something powerful within me. It wasn't just anger or frustration. It was the beginning of a resolve to no longer be invisible in my own life. The incessant ticking of the living room clock was the only sound, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Helena, my mother-in-law, sat across from me, her eyes scrutinizing, as if she were trying to unravel a mystery that she couldn't quite grasp. "So, Evelyn," she began, her voice laced with a deceptive sweetness, "it's been quite a while since you and Marcus got married. Don't you think it's time you gave me a grandchild?" The question, repetitive and invasive, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't the first time she had broached the subject, and each time she made sure Marcus was conveniently absent. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain composure. "Helena, as we've discussed before, this is a private matter between Marcus and me." "Oh, but you're the woman in this relationship," she countered sharply. "It's your duty to bear children. Or is there something wrong with you? You know, in the old days, women who couldn't have children were considered, well, let's just say, less of a wife. Her words stung, a deliberate jab to my self-worth. I felt a surge of anger, but I held it back. Responding in kind would only give her the satisfaction of knowing she had gotten under my skin. There's nothing wrong with me, Helena, I replied evenly. It's a decision we've made together. Marcus agrees. Marcus? She scoffed. He's just being considerate of your shortcomings. A real woman wouldn't deny her husband a family. I was taken aback by her blatant rudeness. It was one thing to insinuate, but to openly call into question my womanhood was a new low, even for Helena. Is that what you truly think of me, Helena? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed her to acknowledge the venom in her words. She leaned forward, a cold glint in her eyes. I think a woman's role is clear, and you, my dear, are failing in yours. I wouldn't be surprised if Marcus started looking elsewhere for fulfillment. The threat was clear, and it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about nagging anymore. It was a calculated attack on my marriage, my character. As she continued to spew her archaic beliefs, I realized that Marcus had been allowing this to happen. He never stood up for me, never corrected his mother's misconceptions. He had left me to fend for myself against her. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. I was not just battling Helena's prejudice. I was also fighting Marcus's indifference. It was a two-front war, and I was suddenly very aware that I had been fighting it alone. I excused myself from the room, Helena's mocking laughter following me. In my bedroom, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was strong, resilient. She was someone who deserved respect, not disdain. I made a silent vow then I would no longer be the passive recipient of Helena's cruelty. It was time for her to see the consequences of her actions. And as for Marcus, he would soon have to choose a side. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the breakfast I had prepared. As I arranged the plates, my mind was preoccupied with the upcoming trip for my mother Leah's 60th birthday. The idea of a surprise getaway to Aspen, a place she had always dreamed of visiting, brought a rare smile to my face. Marcus walked into the kitchen, his eyes glued to his phone. "Morning," he mumbled, barely acknowledging my presence. "Morning. I wanted to talk to you about next weekend," I said, pouring him a cup of coffee. "We're going to Aspen for my mom's birthday. I've planned a little surprise." He finally looked up, his interest piqued. "Aspen, huh? Staying somewhere nice?" I nodded. "A beautiful resort. It's going to be special for her." He sipped his coffee, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Sounds expensive. You sure we can afford it?" "I got a great deal," I reassured him. "And it's important to me. We rarely do something nice for my parents." Marcus shrugged. "As long as it's not too lavish. You know how I feel about unnecessary spending." His response stung. It was always about money with Marcus, never about the sentiment. I pushed down the hurt, focusing on the positive. "It's all arranged. We just need to pack and show up." The day of the trip arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. As we drove to the resort, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Marcus had been unusually quiet, lost in his own thoughts. Upon arriving at the resort, my heart sank. There, in the lobby, were Helena and Richard, Marcus's parents. My surprise for Leah was now overshadowed by their unexpected presence. "Marcus, what's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. He avoided my gaze, shifting uncomfortably. "I thought it would be nice to invite my parents too. They deserve a break." I was speechless. This was supposed to be about my mother, our time with her. "You invited them to my mother's birthday getaway, without even asking me?" Helena stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Why, Evelyn, we're family. It's only right we share in these lovely occasions." The situation was spiraling out of control. I looked at Marcus, searching for some sign of understanding, some acknowledgement of his betrayal, but there was none. The confrontation that followed was heated and painful. Accusations were hurled, old resentments surfaced. Helena's true nature was on full display, her words laced with venom as she belittled my efforts and my family. I had reached my breaking point. The realization that Marcus would always prioritize his mother's wishes over mine was a painful awakening. I had been living in a fantasy, hoping for a change that would never come. As I retreated to our room, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, but it also ignited something within me. A determination, a resolve to no longer be a pawn in their selfish games. It was time for a change. It was time for Helena to understand that her actions had consequences, and for Marcus to realize the cost of his indifference. The Aspen Resort, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun, should have been a haven of peace. Instead, it had become an arena for family tensions. Helena's presence, uninvited and unwelcome, cast a shadow over what was meant to be a celebratory occasion. I watched as Helena and Richard mingled with my parents, Leah and David. The contrast between their attitudes was stark. My parents, ever gracious and accommodating, tried to make the best of the awkward situation. Helena, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in the discomfort she had caused, her comments laced with passive aggression. Marcus was oblivious to the tension, or perhaps chose to ignore it. His indifference to the entire situation was infuriating. I pulled him aside, needing answers. "Marcus, you need to explain. Why did you invite your parents without discussing it with me?" I demanded, my voice low but firm. He seemed taken aback by my tone. "Evelyn, they're my parents. Why shouldn't they be here? Besides, it's not like we see them that often." "Not that often? We see them almost every weekend." My frustration was boiling over. This was supposed to be about my mother, our time with her. You've completely disregarded my feelings. "Evelyn, you're overreacting," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "It's just a weekend. We can all enjoy it together." His casual dismissal of my feelings was like a slap in the face. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the growing anger. "This isn't just about the weekend, Marcus. It's about respect, something you clearly lack." Before he could respond, Helena's voice cut through the air. "Evelyn, dear, are you causing trouble again? You should be grateful we're here to liven up this little gathering." Her words were like a match to tinder. I spun around to face her, my patience exhausted. "Grateful? Helena, you've done nothing but intrude and belittle me since you arrived. This was supposed to be a special occasion for my mother, and you've turned it into a spectacle." Helena smirked, clearly enjoying the confrontation. "Oh, Evelyn, always so dramatic. You should learn to appreciate family more. After all, we're the only ones you've got." The condescension in her tone was unbearable. "Appreciate? You mean tolerate. I've tolerated enough, Helena. Your constant meddling, your derogatory comments. It ends now." Richard, who had been a silent observer until now, finally spoke up. "Evelyn, let's not make a scene. It's just a misunderstanding." "No, Richard, it's not. It's a pattern," I countered. "A pattern of disrespect and manipulation. And I'm done being a part of it." The air was thick with tension, the conflict reaching a boiling point. I knew then that this weekend would be a turning point, one way or another. The veil of cordiality had been lifted, revealing the true dynamics of our family, and there was no going back. The next morning dawned with a tense atmosphere, the fallout from last night's confrontation hanging heavily in the air. I found myself in the resort's elegant dining hall, a place of beauty that felt oddly suffocating under the current circumstances. As I sipped my coffee, lost in thought, Helena approached me with her usual air of superiority. "Evelyn, I hope you've thought about what you said last night. It's not too late to apologize and make things right." Her words, dripping with condescension, ignited a fire within me. "Apologize? Helena, it seems you've misunderstood the situation. I'm not the one who should be apologizing." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You've been nothing but a thorn in our family's side since the day you married Marcus. It's high time you learned your place." Her blatant disrespect was appalling. My place, Helena? And where exactly is that? In the shadows, silently enduring your insults. Marcus, overhearing our exchange, joined us with a look of exasperation. "Evelyn, can't you just let it go? Mom means well." "Means well?" I repeated, incredulous. "Your mother has been undermining and insulting me at every turn, and you've done nothing but enable her behavior." Before Marcus could respond, a well-dressed man approached our table. He was the resort manager, and his arrival brought a momentary pause to our heated exchange. "Mrs. Helena, I must ask you to refrain from causing further disturbances," he said politely but firmly. "We value the comfort and peace of all our guests." Helena's face reddened with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who I am?" "Yes, I am aware," the manager replied calmly. However, respect and decency are required from all our guests, regardless of their status. As Helena sputtered in indignation, the manager turned to me. Mrs. Evelyn, if there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable, please let us know. I was about to thank him when Helena burst out. This is absurd. We're being treated like commoners because of her. It was then that the true twist of fate unfolded. The manager, looking directly at Helena, spoke in a tone that commanded the room. Mrs. Helena, perhaps you are unaware, but this resort is owned by Mrs. Evelyn's family. We have been instructed to treat all our guests with equal respect, including you. The revelation hit everyone like a tidal wave. Helena's face drained of color, her usual bravado crumbling. Marcus looked at me, his expression a mix of shock and confusion. As such, the manager continued, I must insist on proper conduct during your stay. The tables had turned, the power dynamics shifted in a way Helena had never anticipated. For once, she was at a loss for words, her usual arsenal of insults failing her. I looked at Marcus, his eyes finally meeting mine. Marcus, this is more than just about this weekend. It's about us, our marriage. I need a husband who stands by me, not one who hides behind his mother's skirts. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but for the first time he seemed unsure of what to say. The realization that he had underestimated me and the situation was dawning on him. As Helena and Marcus processed the new reality, I felt a sense of empowerment. For too long I had been under their thumb, but now the truth was out in the open. It was a moment of reckoning, and I was ready to face it head-on. The shock of the revelation about the resort ownership lingered in the air, palpable and heavy. Helena's usual domineering demeanor had dissolved, leaving her visibly shaken. Marcus, too, was unusually quiet, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. As we gathered for breakfast, an uneasy silence enveloped the table. My parents, Leah and David, exchanged concerned glances but remained respectfully quiet. Richard, Marcus's father, seemed equally uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Helena and me. Helena, struggling to regain her composure, broke the silence with a forced laugh. Well, this is quite the surprise, Evelyn. Owning a resort, you've been keeping secrets. Her attempt to lighten the mood fell flat. I met her gaze squarely. It's not about owning a resort, Helena. It's about respect, something you've consistently failed to show. Marcus finally spoke, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. Evelyn, let's not do this here. We can talk in private. No, Marcus, I replied firmly. We've had enough private talks. It's time things were said openly. Richard, who had remained silent, chimed in. Helena, maybe we should have a word outside. But Helena was not to be silenced. I don't see why everyone is making such a fuss. We're family, aren't we? Family shares. Shares, yes, but they also respect each other's boundaries, I countered. Something you've never understood. Marcus's expression was one of conflict, torn between his loyalty to his mother and the dawning realization of her manipulative behavior. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I didn't know this would happen. Sorry isn't enough, Marcus. Your mother's actions and your inaction have shown me where I stand in this family. My voice was steady, but my heart ached with the weight of the truth. I can't be part of a family that treats me like an outsider. The words hung in the air, a final acknowledgement of the chasm that had grown between us. Helena's face was a mask of disbelief, her usual tactics rendered useless in the face of plain truth. Richard, sensing the gravity of the situation, took Helena's arm, urging her to leave the room. As they exited, Helena's parting look was one of resentment, not remorse. Marcus remained, his eyes pleading for understanding. Evelyn, please, we can work this out. But the resolve within me was unshakable. Marcus, it's not just about this weekend. It's about every unacknowledged insult, every moment you chose to ignore my feelings. I can't be in a marriage where I'm constantly undermined and disrespected. Standing up, I left Marcus at the table, his pleas fading behind me. The decision was painful but necessary. I had endured enough, and it was time to reclaim my dignity. As I walked away, I felt a mix of sorrow and strength. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. In the weeks following the tumultuous weekend at the resort, life had taken an unexpected turn. The decision to end my marriage with Marcus, though agonizing, brought a newfound sense of freedom. I had chosen to walk away from a relationship that had become a shadow of what it once promised. As I sat in the cozy office of the resort, now my place of work, I reflected on the events that led me here. The resort, a family legacy, had offered me a sanctuary and a new beginning. Working here wasn't just a job, it was a reclamation of my identity, away from the shadows of Helena and Marcus's influence. The door opened, and my uncle, the owner of the resort, and a man I deeply respected, walked in. "Evelyn, how are you settling in?" he asked, his eyes warm with genuine concern. "Better than I expected," I replied, smiling. "Thank you for this opportunity, Uncle. It means more than you know." He nodded, understanding the unspoken words. "You've always been strong, Evelyn, stronger than you realized." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a colleague, bringing news that would add a final twist to my story. "Evelyn, you might want to see this," she said, handing me a local newspaper. The front page carried a story that was both shocking and vindicating. Helena and Marcus had been involved in a public altercation, one that had escalated to the point of police intervention. The article detailed Helena's attempt to control Marcus's life, even post-divorce, leading to a heated exchange that had spiraled out of control. As I read the article, a mix of emotions washed over me. There was a sense of vindication, seeing Helena's true nature exposed for all to see. But there was also sadness, a poignant reminder of the man Marcus could have been, if not for his mother's overbearing influence. My uncle's voice brought me back to the present. "Evelyn, remember, you're not defined by their actions. You've moved on to better things." He was right. I had moved on, both in location and in spirit. Working at the resort had brought challenges, but it had also brought a sense of accomplishment and recognition that I had sorely missed. My efforts were valued, my opinions respected. It was a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more confident, more sure of my path. The resort, with its bustling activity and diverse clientele, was a world away from the stifling environment of my previous life. I often thought about Marcus and Helena, wondering if they ever realized the extent of their actions. But those thoughts were fleeting, mere shadows of a past I had chosen to leave behind. In this new chapter of my life, I was no longer just Evelyn, the overlooked wife, the disrespected daughter-in-law. I was Evelyn, the capable and respected professional, the woman who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. As I looked out of the office window at the bustling activity of the resort, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, filled with pain and betrayal, but it had led me here, to a place of growth and self-discovery, and for that I was grateful. I stood in the doorway of our new home, the home that Richard and I had dreamt of for years. My heart swelled with pride at the thought of the life we were about to start here. The house was still echoing with the sounds of emptiness, waiting to be filled with our laughter and memories. But that dream was about to be shattered in a way I never could have imagined. As I unpacked a box in the kitchen, I heard the doorbell ring. "I'll get it," I called out, wiping my hands on my apron. I opened the door expecting to see a neighbor or maybe a delivery person. Instead, there stood a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, with a confident air about her. "Hello, can I help you?" I asked, puzzled. Before she could answer, Richard appeared behind me. "Ah, you're here. Come in, Isabella," he said cheerfully, brushing past me to welcome her inside. Confused, I followed them into the living room. "Richard, who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma, meet Isabella. She's my girlfriend," he said, as casually as if he were talking about the weather. I felt the ground beneath me shift. "You're what?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. Isabella looked around the house, commenting on everything with an ease that made my stomach churn. "It's a lovely house. The kitchen is so spacious, and oh, look at those big windows." Richard beamed at her. "I'm glad you like it. Emma, isn't it great that Isabella approves of our new home?" I stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words sank in. This was not a misunderstanding or a bad joke. My husband, the man I had trusted and loved for a decade, was openly admitting to an affair in our own home. "But the house, it was for us," I stammered, my mind racing. Richard shrugged. "Things change, Emma. I've found someone who truly understands me." Isabella laughed, a light, carefree sound that felt like a slap in my face. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Emma. It's just life, you know." Their words cut through me. but they also ignited a fire within me. I wasn't going to be the victim in this cruel play of fate. "You think you can just replace me? In my own house?" I said, my voice gaining strength. Richard looked at me, his expression cold. "It's not just your house anymore, Emma. It's ours." I knew then that this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a battle for my dignity, my home, and my future. A battle I was determined to win. Leaving Richard and Isabella in the living room, I retreated to the sanctuary of my bedroom, the walls of which seemed to mock me with their newly painted cheerfulness. As I sat on the edge of our bed, now just a piece of furniture in a house that no longer felt like mine, the reality of Richard's betrayal sank in. Tears streamed down my face, not just for a lost marriage, but for the life I thought I had. The next few hours were a blur. I packed a suitcase with mechanical movements, my mind numbed by shock. Each item I placed inside felt like a piece of my heart being torn away. I couldn't bear to stay in the house a moment longer. Arriving at my parents' house was like stepping into a different world. The familiar warmth and comfort contrasted sharply with the cold betrayal I had just left behind. My mother opened the door, her face lighting up with joy, which quickly turned to concern when she saw the suitcase and my tear-streaked face. "Emma, what happened? Why are you here with your suitcase?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The dam of emotions I had been holding back broke, and I collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She led me inside, her presence a soothing balm to my shattered soul. It wasn't until much later, when my sobs had subsided into sniffles, that I managed to recount the day's events. I told her about Isabella, about Richard's betrayal, and the painful realization that my marriage was a lie. My mother listened in silence, her eyes reflecting the storm of emotions I felt. Anger, sorrow, disbelief, they all flickered across her face as she processed what I had said. "When did it start, Emma? Did you have any suspicions?" she finally asked. I shook my head, feeling a fresh wave of pain. "I don't know, Mom. I thought we were happy. I was so blind." She took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not blind, Emma. You trusted the man you loved. There's no shame in that." Her words were a small comfort, but they couldn't quell the storm raging inside me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and above all furious. The image of Richard and Isabella laughing and planning their future in the house that was supposed to be ours filled me with a burning desire for revenge. "What are you going to do, Emma? Are you going to let them get away with this?" my mother asked, her voice firm. I looked up, meeting her eyes. In them, I saw a reflection of the determination growing within me. "No, Mom. I won't let them get away with this. Richard and his lover will pay for what they've done." The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations and late-night strategy sessions with my mother. We pored over property laws and divorce statutes, seeking loopholes and strategies to turn the tables on Richard. My mother, once a paralegal, became my ally in this battle of wits and law. I returned to the house unannounced, my resolve as solid as the walls around me. Richard and Isabella were in the living room, their laughter echoing through the hallway. They froze as I stepped in, their expressions a mix of surprise and irritation. "Emma, what are you doing here?" Richard asked, his tone dismissive. "I came to talk about the house and our divorce," I said firmly, my eyes never leaving his. Isabella scoffed. "Still hung up on that, are you? Move on, Emma." Ignoring her, I focused on Richard. "This house is in my name. Legally, you have no claim to it." Richard's face hardened. "We built this house together, Emma. I have every right to it." "But legally, you don't," I countered, feeling a surge of confidence. "And as for the divorce, I'll make sure it reflects your infidelity." Isabella laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "You think you can intimidate us with legal threats? Grow up, Emma." Richard stood up, his posture tense. "You're out of your depth here. Just sign the divorce papers and leave us be." I smiled, a cold, calculated expression. "I'm not here to make your life easier, Richard. I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine, and if you think I'll walk away quietly, you're sorely mistaken." The look of shock on Richard's face was satisfying, but it was just the beginning. I knew this was a long battle ahead, and I was ready for it. As I turned to leave, I looked back at them, their faces a picture of disbelief and annoyance. "This is my house, and I will fight for it. And Richard, you'll regret the day you decided to betray me," I said, my voice steady and strong. As I walked out of the house, I felt a sense of power I had never experienced before. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the architect of their downfall, and I would make sure Richard and Isabella paid dearly for their betrayal. Armed with legal advice and a newfound determination, I began to dismantle Richard's life piece by piece. My first move was to freeze our joint accounts, cutting off the financial lifeline he had been so comfortably relying on. I watched, almost detached, as Richard's facade of control began to crumble. A few days later, I received a call from him, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "Emma, what the hell do you think you're doing? You've frozen our accounts." "That's right, Richard. You seem to forget that half of that money is mine," I replied, my voice calm and steady. "You can't just cut me off like this. We need to discuss this," he demanded. "Discuss? Like how you discussed your affair with me?" "I don't think so," I retorted. Richard's voice grew louder, more frantic. "You're ruining everything. This is petty and childish." I could almost see him pacing, his world spinning out of control. "Petty? Childish? No, Richard. This is me taking control. You made your choices, and now you'll live with the consequences." I hung up, feeling a rush of adrenaline. For years I had played the part of the supportive, unsuspecting wife, but those days were over. Next, I turned my attention to the house. I consulted with a lawyer and initiated proceedings to evict Richard and Isabella. The legal documents were delivered to them, and I savored the sweet taste of vengeance. Richard called again, this time his voice laced with a hint of fear. "You're evicting us? You can't be serious, Emma." "Oh, but I am. This house is in my name, and I don't recall inviting you and your girlfriend to stay," I said. "You can't just throw us out on the street," he protested. "Watch me," I replied coldly. The days that followed were a testament to my resolve. Richard tried to negotiate, to bargain, to plead, but I was unmoved. My heart had turned to stone against the man who had betrayed me so callously. The day of the eviction arrived, and I stood outside the house as Richard and Isabella left, their belongings in tow. Isabella shot me a venomous look, but I met it with a triumphant smile. "Enjoy your new life, Richard. You've earned it," I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. As they drove away, I stepped into the house, now empty of their presence. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. I had taken back control of my life, and it was just the beginning. Richard and Isabella had underestimated me, and they were now paying the price. With Richard and Isabella out of the house, I focused on the next phase of my plan. I started by changing the locks and installing a new security system, erasing every trace of Richard from what was once our shared space. The house, which had been a symbol of our life together, was now solely under my control. My lawyer and I then began the process of negotiating the divorce settlement. I insisted on a meeting with Richard, wanting to see the impact of my actions face to face. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, composed and ready. Richard walked in, a shadow of his former confident self. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I had once loved, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by bitterness and resentment. "Emma, let's be reasonable about this," he started, his voice strained. "Reasonable? Like how you were reasonable when you brought your lover into our home." I countered sharply. He shifted uncomfortably. "That was a mistake, I know, but we can still settle this amicably." I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "Amicable is off the table, Richard. You lost that option when you decided to betray me." The negotiations were tense, with Richard trying to salvage whatever he could. But I was unyielding. In the end, we reached a settlement heavily in my favor. Richard would have to liquidate most of his assets to meet the terms. As he signed the papers, his hand trembling slightly, I felt a sense of satisfaction. This was more than just a legal victory. It was a moral one. After the meeting, I received a call from Isabella. Her voice was high-pitched and frantic. "Emma, you can't do this to us. You're destroying our lives," she cried. I replied coldly, "Your comfort was never my concern, Isabella. You and Richard made your bed. Now you get to lie in it." "But we have nothing now. How could you be so heartless?" she wailed. "Heartless? You expect sympathy from me? I'm giving you exactly what you deserve," I said, hanging up the phone. In the weeks that followed, I watched as Richard's life unraveled. His financial woes, compounded by the divorce settlement, left him struggling to keep afloat. Isabella, once so confident and carefree, became a frequent figure in heated arguments outside my lawyer's office. I had taken back control, not just of my home, but of my life. Richard and Isabella were now mere players in a game they had no hope of winning. The tides had turned, and I was the one setting the course. The months following the divorce were a testament to the change in our fortunes. I rebuilt my life, slowly filling the empty spaces in the house with new memories, while Richard's world seemed to crumble around him. One day, I received an unexpected visit from Richard. He looked disheveled, a far cry from the confident man he once was. His eyes had a desperate look as he stood on my doorstep. "Emma, please, we need to talk," he pleaded. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "What is there to talk about, Richard?" "It's about the settlement. I can't afford it. I'm drowning in debt," he said, his voice breaking. I felt a pang of something that might have been pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of his betrayal. "That's not my problem, Richard. You should have thought about that before." He took a step closer, desperation etching his features. "I was wrong, Emma. I know that now. But this is too much. I can't survive like this." I looked at him, the man who had once meant the world to me, now reduced to a shell of his former self. "Survive? Like I had to when you shattered my world? You're just tasting a bit of your own medicine, Richard." Richard's face twisted in a mix of anger and sorrow. "Is this what you wanted, Emma? To see me destroyed?" "This is what justice looks like, Richard. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences," I replied. He stared at me, the realization dawning on him that there was no sympathy to be found here. With a defeated look, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. As I closed the door, I realized that the satisfaction I had expected to feel was muted. Watching Richard's downfall was a hollow victory. It didn't bring back the years of trust and love that had been lost, nor did it erase the pain of betrayal, but it was a necessary closure. I had stood up for myself, fought back against injustice, and reclaimed my life. It was time to move on, to leave the past and its pain behind. In the quiet of my home, I knew that the battle was over. I had won, not just against Richard, but against the helplessness that had once threatened to engulf me. It was a victory, not of revenge, but of resilience and renewal. The final act of my retribution came unexpectedly. Richard, now a shadow of his former self, reached out to me again, but this time it was different. He needed my help. We met at a coffee shop, a neutral ground far from the memories of our shared past. Richard was late, and when he arrived, he looked more haggard than ever. "Emma, I'm in trouble," as he said without preamble, his voice laden with a fatigue I hadn't heard before. I raised an eyebrow, sipping my coffee. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" It's Isabella. She's pregnant," he confessed, avoiding my gaze. The news didn't surprise me as much as his reaction to it. "And how is that my problem, Richard?" He swallowed hard, the lines on his face deepening. "It's not just that she's pregnant. She's demanding money, a lot of it. She says if I don't pay, she'll make sure I never see the child." I listened, my expression unreadable. "So the woman you left me for is now blackmailing you? How poetic." Richard's eyes met mine, a flicker of the man he used to be shining through his desperation. "I don't know what to do, Emma. I've lost everything. I can't afford to lose my child, too." There was a time when his plea would have tugged at my heartstrings, but that time was long gone. "You expect sympathy from me, after everything you've done?" "No, not sympathy. Help. I need your help, Emma," he said, the words seeming to cost him his last shred of pride. I considered his request, the irony of the situation not lost on me. Richard, once so sure of himself and his decisions, was now at my mercy. But I wasn't the same woman he had left. His problems were no longer mine to bear. "I can't help you, Richard. This is the life you chose. You have to deal with the consequences, just like I did," I said, my voice firm. Richard looked defeated, his shoulders slumping as he realized that there was no help to be found here. He nodded slowly, a resigned acceptance in his eyes. As he left, I watched him go, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. This was the end of our story, a story that had started with love and ended with betrayal and retribution. I sat there for a long time, lost in thought. My journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had also been empowering. I had found strength I never knew I had, and I had come out on the other side, stronger and more resilient. Richard's downfall was a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal. But it was also a reminder that I was no longer defined by his actions. I was my own person, free from the shadows of the past. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter of my life that was Richard was finally closed, and a new chapter was waiting to be written. A chapter filled with hope, strength, and the promise of a new beginning. As months turned into seasons, I found myself embarking on a journey of self-discovery and rebuilding. The house, once a symbol of shared dreams with Richard, gradually transformed into a sanctuary of my personal triumph and newfound independence. One evening, as I sat in the living room surrounded by the new decor that reflected my tastes, the doorbell rang. Hesitantly, I opened the door to find Isabella standing there. Her appearance drastically changed. Gone was the confident, carefree woman. In her place stood someone who looked defeated and weary. "Emma, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice lacking its former haughtiness. I was taken aback but composed myself quickly. "What do you want, Isabella?" She took a deep breath, her eyes not meeting mine. "I made a mistake, a big mistake. Richard's left me, and I'm alone with a baby on the way. I have nowhere to go." The irony of her standing on my doorstep, seeking help, was not lost on me. "And you think I'm the person to help you? After everything?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm desperate. I've lost everything." I looked at her, seeing in her the reflection of the pain and betrayal I had once felt. But where Richard had ignited a fire of retribution in me, Isabella's plight stirred a different emotion. "Isabella, the choices we make define us. You made your choice when you got involved with a married man," I said, my voice steady. She nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I know, and I'm paying for that choice now. I didn't know where else to go." I sighed, feeling a sense of closure and compassion that surprised me. "I can't change the past, Isabella, nor can I forget it, but I believe in second chances. I'll help you, but not because of Richard or our past. I'm doing this for your child, who shouldn't suffer for our mistakes." Isabella looked up, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Thank you, Emma. I don't know how to repay you." I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything. Consider this a new start for both of us." As she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Helping Isabella was the final step in letting go of the bitterness and pain. It was a gesture not of forgiveness but of release. Standing in my home, I realized that I had not only survived the storm but emerged stronger. I had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and found a way to move forward with grace and dignity. I walked to the window, looking out at the night sky. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter, and I felt a sense of peace. The chapter of revenge had closed, and a new chapter of hope and resilience had begun. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready for it. I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my identity. And with that knowledge, I stepped into the future, unburdened and free. The breeze whipped my hair across my face as the cherry blossoms rained down around us. I looked over at Nolan, taking in his chiseled jawline and kind eyes. He had one hand rested gently on the back of my wheelchair as he pushed me along the winding path in the park. "It's so beautiful here," I said. "Thank you for bringing me." "Of course, darling," Nolan replied, leaning down to plant a soft kiss on my forehead. "I'd do anything for you, you know that." I smiled up at him, my heart swelling. After the accident that left me paralyzed, Nolan had been my rock. He took care of my every need, catering to my wheelchair, helping me bathe, making sure I took my medications. I didn't know what I would do without him. We continued through the park, the pavement smooth beneath my wheelchair. Up ahead, the path sloped downwards towards a small bridge crossing a stream. "Oh, look, the bridge," I said. "Let's stop for a moment once we cross." "Of course," Nolan said, his voice suddenly tense. As we started down the slope, he pivoted my chair sideways. Before I could ask what he was doing, he leaned down, his lips nearly touching my ear. "I'm bankrupt," he whispered harshly. "I've blown through your inheritance. I need that life insurance money if we're going to live comfortably." My heart dropped into my stomach, his words registered. "What are you saying?" I gasped. "I'm so sorry about this, darling." With that, he shoved my wheelchair forward with immense force. I screamed as I hurtled down the steep slope, bracing myself as the wheelchair hit the bottom and flipped over, tossing me onto the hard ground. Sharp pain radiated through my body and my vision blurred. "Nolan!" I tried to shout, but it came out as a whimper. I heard his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he approached. When he leaned over me, his face was a mask of anguish. "Oh my God, Alara!" he cried. "I'm so sorry. I lost control of your wheelchair. Here, let me get you back in." As he righted the wheelchair, disbelief flooded through me. He was pretending that this was an accident. He scooped me up and gently placed me back in the seat, his brows knitted together in feigned worry. I scanned the area wildly, but we were alone. "What have you done?" I choked out, barely able to get the words out past the pain in my ribs. "Shh," he soothed. "Try not to move. You might have broken something. I'm going to call an ambulance." As he pretended to dial his phone, I saw a flash of panic cross his face. His plan had gone horribly wrong. He knelt down next to me again, taking my hand in his. "Just hang on, baby. Help is coming. I promise I'll take care of you." The false affection in his voice made me want to vomit. Hot tears spilled down my cheeks as I realized the man I loved had tried to kill me. The steady beep of the heart monitor greeted me as I blinked open my eyes. I was in a hospital room, my body aching. Nolan sat in a chair next to the bed, his leg heavily bandaged. He looked up as I stirred, relief washing over his face. "Oh, thank God you're awake," he gushed, grasping my hand. "I was so worried." My pulse quickened as memories came flooding back. The wheelchair careening down the hill, Nolan's cold confession, his botched attempt to kill me. I yanked my hand away. "Don't touch me," I hissed. Nolan drew back, feigning confusion. "Alara, what's wrong?" "You pushed me down that hill. You wanted me dead for the insurance money," I accused. Nolan's mouth fell open. "What?" "No, it was an accident. I would never hurt you, Alara. I tried to stop the wheelchair, but it went out of control. I jumped down the slope after you, but my leg got caught between the wheelchair spokes as I tried to stop your fall. I'm so sorry I couldn't prevent you from getting hurt." I studied his face, searching for any hint of deception, but found only earnest concern. "The doctor said you have a concussion," Nolan continued. "You must have imagined what happened due to the head trauma." Doubt crept into my mind. Could I have imagined it? My memories from that day were hazy. And now Nolan was injured too. I glanced at his bandaged leg, guilt replacing the suspicion. I'm sorry," I stammered. "I must be confused." Nolan squeezed my hand reassuringly. "It's okay. I'm just glad you're all right." Over the next few days, as my injuries healed, Nolan doted on me relentlessly. He fluffed my pillows, fed me soup, and held my hand when the pain meds wore off. His unwavering devotion made me feel foolish for ever questioning his intentions. But as the weeks passed, small things seemed off. Nolan became obsessed with money, poring over our accounts and insurance policies. He insisted on extravagant home modifications to accommodate my wheelchair, urging me to pay for them with my inheritance. One night, as I wheeled into the bedroom, Nolan slammed his laptop shut quickly. "What are you looking at?" I asked. "Oh, nothing important," he said, avoiding eye contact. While he was in the shower, I opened the laptop and accessed the browser history. My heart sank as I saw searches for how to increase your spouse's life insurance and big payouts for accidental deaths. Nolan hadn't been searching for accident victims to help. He was researching how to profit from my hypothetical accidental death. Bile rose in my throat as I finally accepted the truth. The devoted caregiver routine was an act to keep me under his control. The man I loved was trying to murder me. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a new normal. The doctors said my paralysis was permanent, so Nolan dutifully catered to my needs. But his mask slipped more each day. He obsessed over my inheritance, insisting I use it to convert our home into a wheelchair paradise. Meanwhile, he splurged on golf clubs, TVs, and gadgets. One night at dinner, he brought it up again. "Alara, I really think we should overhaul the entryway and widen the door frames downstairs. We need to make this house accessible for you." I pushed my food around my plate, anxiety churning in my gut. "Those renovations will deplete the remainder of my inheritance. Can't we just make do?" Nolan frowned, a flash of anger in his eyes. "But don't you want to be comfortable and self-sufficient? This inheritance is meant to be used on you." I couldn't tell him the truth, that I was preserving those funds to escape someday. "Let's just discuss it later." I said weakly, hoping to placate him. After dinner, I went upstairs and discovered Nolan had installed a new safe in our closet. He never mentioned it, and it was already locked. What was he hiding? A few nights later, Nolan left his email open on my laptop, my eyes fixed on one message from an insurance company with the subject line, "Policy Upgrade Request." Hands trembling, I opened it. Nolan had asked to increase my life insurance and add an accidental death payout. When I confronted him, he insisted it was just to provide for me in case of tragedy. But I knew it was premeditation. The final straw came a week later when I overheard Nolan on the phone scheduling a lavish housekeeping service. We didn't need it, but he seemed hell-bent on draining my inheritance with frivolous spending. After he hung up, I wheeled into the kitchen and tossed my checkbook onto the counter. "I'll be handling my own finances going forward," I informed him coldly. Nolan's facade fully slipped, his face contorting in anger. "How dare you? That money is as much mine as it is yours." "It's my inheritance," I shot back, "and I'm done letting you blow it." Nolan advanced on me, his voice a low snarl. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you." Adrenaline coursed through me. "The jig is up, Nolan. I won't let you steal my inheritance while you plot my murder." Rage blazed in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. "Don't be ridiculous," he sneered. "I'll never understand your paranoia. But fine, manage your own money. It doesn't change my love and devotion." His duplicity infuriated me further, but I held my tongue. I needed to protect my finances at all costs until I could find a way out. Over the next few weeks, money became a battleground in our home. I took over the finances, carefully tracking every penny. When Nolan demanded I hire his lavish housekeeping service, I refused. "We don't need it," I said firmly. "I can handle the cleaning." Nolan's face darkened. "But in your condition." "I'm fine," I cut him off. "We're not wasting money." After that, our arguments escalated. Nolan increasingly spent money behind my back, on expensive takeout when I cooked simple meals, new electronics, anything he desired. One day, I came home to find he had purchased a $3,000 Tempur-Pedic mattress without consulting me. "Return it now," I demanded. "Why are you being so controlling?" he shot back. "I'm just trying to make our home nicer for you." "Bullshit," I spat. "You're bleeding our accounts dry, trying to spend my inheritance before I cut you off." Nolan's expression contorted in rage. For a moment, I thought he might hit me, but he quickly smoothed his face into a mask of polite concern. "Elara, I'm worried about you," he said gently. "This obsession with money isn't healthy. You know I just want what's best for you." I wanted to scream at his pathetically transparent manipulation, but I held myself in check. Over the next week, small amounts of cash began disappearing from my purse. $20 here, $50 there. I knew Nolan was taking it. Meanwhile, the utilities and credit card bills skyrocketed without explanation. One night I logged into our accounts and realized why. Nolan had increased the thermostat to 85 degrees, changed our cable package to premium channels, and added himself as an authorized user to my credit card. The next morning, I changed the thermostat back and called the cable company to downgrade our plan. When Nolan realized what I'd done, he cornered me in the kitchen. "How dare you make changes without consulting me?" he bellowed. I refused to cower. "I'm correcting your frivolous spending. You're bleeding me dry." Nolan slammed his fist on the counter. "That's my money, too. You don't get to control everything." "It's my inheritance," I shouted back. "I see exactly what you're doing, trying to drain that money, but I won't let you get away with it." Nolan stepped closer, looming over me. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "That money is the only reason I'm stuck playing your little wheelchair nursemaid." I recoiled at his words, my worst fears confirmed. Our relationship was nothing but a ruse designed to steal my inheritance. "Get away from me," I snarled. "We're done." I wheeled my chair backwards from him, my heart pounding with rage and adrenaline. The man I loved was gone. All that remained was a manipulating thief trying to drive me to bankruptcy or death. But I wouldn't back down or surrender my independence. Not to him, not to anyone. The battle lines were drawn. After our blow-up, I stopped speaking to Nolan altogether. The loving facade had slipped away, exposing his deceit. Now we coexisted in tense silence, speaking only when necessary. I continued scrutinizing our accounts, noticing strange inconsistencies. Gas, and grocery expenditures were double what they should have been. When I asked Nolan about it, he got evasive. "I've just been driving more for errands," he muttered, "and groceries are expensive lately." I knew he was lying and pocketing the extra cash, but I had no proof. Suspicions gnawed at me. Where was he driving? Was he seeing someone else? I decided to find out. I called a private investigator and explained my situation. 2 days later, I received a large envelope in the mail. Hands shaking, I opened it to find photos of Nolan embracing a woman in front of a nice suburban home, captioned with an address. Bile rose in my throat as I realized the truth. Nolan had a secret family. Fury coursed through me. All the manipulation and lies weren't just about money. He was living a double life. I wanted to confront him right away, but I waited. I needed more proof before initiating the inevitable divorce. A few days later, the investigator provided bank records indicating Nolan had purchased the other home outright and was funneling money into a joint account with the other woman. Her name was Celia. Armed with evidence, I decided to confront Nolan at the hospital where he volunteered, a smokescreen for his deceit. As I wheeled into the hospital lobby, I spotted Nolan at the front desk flirting with a nurse. Before he saw me, I called out loudly, "Hey, Nolan, how's Celia doing?" Nolan's head whipped around, his face draining of color when he saw me. He quickly masked his shock with feigned confusion. "Who?" he stammered. I threw the envelope of evidence onto the desk. Photos and bank records spilled out. "Save it!" I spat. "I know about your little wifey across town. Did you really think you could get away with it?" Nolan glared at me coldly. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is absurd." I shook my head in disgust. "The jig is up, Nolan. I'm filing for divorce. Have fun splitting your assets between 2 households." I wheeled my chair away, Nolan calling after me desperately. But I didn't stop. The time for mercy was over. Over the next few days, I met with lawyers to initiate divorce proceedings, documenting Nolan's infidelity and financial deceit. I wanted to ruin him. Soon after, I sat Nolan down at home. "Here are your options," I told him icily. "Agree to a divorce with 0 spousal support, letting me keep 100% of my inheritance, or I'll make sure every one of your friends and family knows exactly what a cheating, swindling scumbag you are." Nolan pleaded with me, but I refused to back down. The man I loved was gone. In his place was a manipulative stranger who needed to pay. After I presented the evidence, Nolan had no choice but to agree to my terms. The divorce was swift and brutal, leaving him financially devastated. I walked away free, my inheritance intact, ready to begin a new chapter away from my lying, cheating ex-husband. What awaited me was unclear, but it had to be better than the nightmare I'd endured. In the months after the divorce, I focused on recovery and adapting to my new normal. My lawyer ensured I received a generous alimony, allowing me to afford live-in care. Though my paralysis persisted, my new doctor encouraged me to stay positive. "Your condition is still evolving," he assured me. "With rehabilitation, you may regain functionality." His optimism lifted my spirits. For the first time since the accident, I had hope. During one appointment, Dr. Fields reviewed my records closely, his brow furrowing. "Let's do some fresh scans," he said. The next day, I received an urgent call from Dr. Fields. "You need to come in immediately," he said gravely. "There are developments." My pulse quickened anxiously as I wheeled into his office. His expression was grim. "What is it?" I asked shakily. "The scans show your spinal cord damage is treatable," he said. "Your previous physician failed to detect this. With surgery, you could walk again." I reeled in shock. "What? But my ex-husband said my paralysis was permanent. Are you saying it's reversible?" Dr. Fields nodded. "Given proper treatment, your prognosis is very good. I believe your previous doctor misinterpreted the scans. Your ex likely concealed this from you." The revelation hit me like a freight train. Nolan had lied to keep me in a wheelchair, dependent on him. Fury boiled up inside me. "That bastard!" I exploded. "He made me believe I'd never walk again. He wanted me helpless so he could control me and access my money." "I'm very sorry," Dr. Fields said sympathetically. "Unfortunately, traumatic spinal cord injuries are often misdiagnosed, but the good news is we can correct this. I'd like to schedule surgery right away." Overwhelmed with emotion, I broke down in tears. For months, I believed I'd spend my life in a wheelchair at the mercy of my lying, cheating ex-husband. But now a chance at freedom stood before me. The night before surgery, I met Nolan at a cafe at his desperate request. He begged me to take him back, claiming he'd changed. "Did you know my paralysis was reversible?" I demanded. "Did you keep it from me?" Nolan's silence was damning. Seething with rage, I slapped him hard across the face. "You soulless monster! You made me believe I was trapped when I could have walked away from you. Well, tomorrow I'm getting surgery so I can dance on your grave someday. I pray I never see you again." I left Nolan crying at the table, his pathetic apologies echoing behind me. The time for mercy and forgiveness had passed. Tomorrow, a new beginning awaited me. The surgery was a success. In the difficult weeks of recovery and rehabilitation that followed, spite fueled me. I imagined trampling over Nolan's broken body as I reclaimed my strength, vowing he'd never rob me of independence again. On the day I took my first solo steps, tears of joy and relief streamed down my face. I was free at last, ready to walk into a new life on my own terms. Nolan had failed. My backbone remained unbroken. In the weeks after my surgery, I wasted no time seeking final vengeance against Nolan. Legally, financially, I wanted to ruin him completely. I met with my lawyer, providing documentation of Nolan's lies about my medical prognosis. We incorporated it into the divorce proceedings to show premeditation and abuse. Nolan wouldn't just lose money in the split, his reputation would be destroyed. "You have ample grounds for additional damages," my lawyer said. "We can sequester his assets and income sources. He won't have a cent left when we're through with him." "Good," I replied coldly. "Take everything." I realized Nolan's bank fraud likely extended beyond just me. I contacted his employer and provided evidence that he had embezzled from client accounts. They immediately opened an investigation, alerting the authorities. Nolan desperately tried to convince me not to expose him further. He even had the audacity to suggest reconciliation. "Alara, haven't you punished me enough?" he pleaded on the phone. "I know I made mistakes, but we can still repair this. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "The only mistake I made was ever trusting you," I spat back. "You tried to steal my inheritance and leave me helpless. There's no coming back from that." I hung up, feeling re-energized in my mission to obliterate him. The next day, I called his half-sister, Layla, who he always clashed with. I told her everything, from the infidelity to the financial deceit. "I knew he was selfish, but this is unbelievable," she fumed. "What a wretched snake. He's dead to me. I'll make sure everyone knows what a vile pig he is." In the weeks that followed, Nolan's life unraveled spectacularly. Friends and family shunned him. He lost his job once the fraud was exposed. Even Celia kicked him out once she learned what he did to me, disgusted by his abhorrent behavior. The divorce finalized with me receiving 80% of our shared assets plus permanent alimony payments, money he no longer had. He'd be financially ruined for years. My lawyer called one final time. "It's done," he said with satisfaction. "Your ex-husband is destitute. His reputation is shredded. You won't be hearing from him again anytime soon." A surge of relief and joy coursed through me. The bitter seeds I'd sown had bloomed into Nolan's complete destruction. He was finally reaping what he deserved, and I was forever free from his poisonous hold on my life. The day my divorce from Nolan was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse with my head held high, the sunlight warming my face. The settlement had been everything I wanted. Nolan was left penniless and alone, forced to start anew with nothing but his wretched self. In the months that followed, I reveled in my freedom and independence. I returned to work, reconnected with old friends, traveled to places I'd always dreamed of seeing. Whenever despair crept in, I repeated my mantra, "Nolan has no power over you now." My new therapist helped me process the emotional trauma I'd endured. "It's important you don't dwell on anger," she counseled gently. "Focus your energy on healing so you can fully embrace this new chapter of your life." I took her advice to heart, channeling my energy into constructive pursuits that enriched my life. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping those escaping abusive situations. It strengthened my resolve to never again ignore red flags in a relationship. On my birthday a few months later, my friends threw a party celebrating my freedom. As we raised our glasses, Sarah made a toast. "Here's to Alara, for her resilience, courage, and for shattering the chains of her miserable marriage. No one deserves this fresh start more than her." Their cheers filled me with newfound hope. The old Alara, helpless, naive, trapped, was gone. A wiser, stronger woman had taken her place. Slowly, I began dating again. After some duds, I met Adam, a kind divorcee and single father. While affection bloomed between us, I took it slow, keeping healthy boundaries. "I'm so glad you're being cautious," Sarah told me. "After everything you've endured, you deserve someone who treats you like the queen you are." While Adam was nothing like Nolan, trusting again didn't come easily. But in time, as his sincerity was proven, my walls came down, brick by brick. One night, as we strolled in the park, I paused under a canopy of twinkling lights strung between the trees. Here, surrounded by the beauty of new beginnings, my heart opened once more. When Adam proposed several months later, I accepted joyfully. While shadows of the past still lurked, the flame burning inside me was stronger. I was prepared for whatever lay ahead, holding fast to hope. On my second wedding day, I marveled at the new chapters life offers, even after devastation. With grace, courage, and perseverance, dormant seeds of joy still blossom in time. As I walked down the aisle on Adam's arm, tears pricked my eyes. My broken spirit had proven resilient. Love and vitality now stretched brightly before me. While Nolan's betrayal nearly extinguished my light, my inner inferno ultimately raged too strong to suffocate. I am more than a victim or survivor. I am the master of my fate, and my greatest triumphs still await. I was standing in the kitchen, the phone pressed against my ear, disbelief washing over me in cold waves. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper, your mother passed away." The voice on the other end, a doctor from Chicago General Hospital, sounded distant, like a faint echo in a long, empty hallway. "My mother?" I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. The room spun, and I gripped the countertop for support. Last week, we had talked about her coming over for Thanksgiving. She was fine then. How could this be? I had to tell Martin. He had been working in Europe for the past 3 months, and communication had been sparse, but he needed to know. I dialed his number, my hands trembling. After several rings, he answered. "Martin, it's Elaine. My mom, she passed away." There was a pause, and then his voice, devoid of warmth, came through. "Oh, I see. Look, Elaine, I'm really tied up right now. I've got a trip planned with the guys to Barcelona. Can't really skip it." His words hit me like a physical blow. "You're not coming back? Not even for the funeral?" I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Elaine, you know how it is with my job. I'll be back in a couple of months. Just handle things there, okay?" And without waiting for my response, he hung up. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, feeling a hollow emptiness growing inside me. My mother was gone, and the man I had spent 20 years with couldn't care less. The next few days passed in a blur of arrangements and condolences, a relentless march of reality that I navigated like a ghost. It was on the third day, in the midst of this, that I received another call that seemed to stop time altogether. It was Martin's brother, Alex. "Elaine, there's been an accident. Mom and Dad, they're gone." The phone slipped from my grasp and clattered to the floor. Martin's parents, too? It felt like some cruel joke, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I called Martin, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I left message after message, each one more desperate than the last. I couldn't go to his parents' funeral. Without Martin, I was just an outsider, a reminder of the son who couldn't be bothered to show up. The thought of their empty seats, an unspoken accusation in the air, was unbearable. As the days passed, I found myself sitting alone in the house we had built together, surrounded by memories that now seemed like lies. I thought back to how we met, introduced by our fathers who were old college friends. It had felt like a fairy tale then, our families joining together in a bond of love and friendship. But as the years went by, the fairy tale had slowly faded. Martin was always busy, always absent. His work was his life, and I, along with our son Peter, were just fixtures in his world. When Peter was 10, my father passed away. My rock, my confidant, gone. Martin had been away on a business trip then, too. I was left alone to deal with the grief, to support our son, to keep the family together. And now, with both our families shattered, I was alone again. Our marriage had become a routine of loneliness and resentment. I was the homemaker, the silent supporter, while Martin was the absent provider. But was he really providing, or just running away from a life he no longer wanted? I tried to remember the last time we had laughed together or shared a moment of genuine connection. but all I could see was the growing distance between us, a chasm filled with unspoken words and unmet needs. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I realized that this wasn't just about his absence. It was about the lack of respect, the lack of empathy. It was about a marriage that had become a hollow shell of what it once was. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I knew that something had to change. I couldn't live in this shadow any longer. The days following the funerals were a whirlwind of silent houses and unanswered calls. I tried to reach Martin again, but it was as if he had vanished off the face of the earth. That's when the memories began to creep in, unwelcome and unbidden. I remembered our early days, how Martin's charm and ambition had swept me off my feet. We were young, in love, and the world seemed full of possibilities. But as years passed, the man I fell in love with started to fade, replaced by someone consumed by work and his own needs. I was pulled from my reverie by a knock on the door. Standing there was Alex, Martin's younger brother. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usual cheerful demeanor nowhere in sight. "Elaine, I can't believe he didn't show up. Not even a call," he said, his voice heavy with grief and disbelief. "I know, Alex. I've been trying to reach him, but..." Nothing. Alex shook his head, his anger palpable. "You know, Elaine, there's something deeply wrong with him. Mom and Dad deserved better. You deserve better." His words struck a chord in me. Deserve better. The thought had crossed my mind, but hearing it from someone else made it real. It wasn't just me feeling this way. "Elaine, if you need anything, just let me know, okay?" Alex offered before he left, a hint of worry in his eyes. That night, as I lay in bed, the house eerily quiet, I realized how much of my life I had dedicated to a man who saw me as nothing more than a convenience. The love, the support, the sacrifices, it was as if they meant nothing to him. A mixture of anger and resolve began to build within me. I wasn't going to be the silent, suffering wife anymore. I needed to find out what Martin was up to, what was so important that he couldn't even show up for his own parents' funeral. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator. It was a drastic step, but I needed to know the truth. The PI was a middle-aged woman named Sarah, who had a no-nonsense air about her. "We'll find out what he's up to," Sarah assured me. "It won't take long." True to her word, within a week, Sarah came back with information that shattered any illusions I had left about Martin. Photos and reports of him with another woman in Barcelona, looking carefree and in love. As I looked at the photos, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just a business trip. This was a betrayal of everything our marriage was supposed to stand for. I confronted Martin over the phone. His response was a cocktail of excuses and deflections. "Elaine, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a work thing." "A work thing? Is that what you call this?" I countered, my voice shaking with anger. "You wouldn't understand. It's complicated," he snapped back, his voice cold and distant. I realized then that I was speaking to a stranger. The man I had married, the man I had built a life with, was gone. In his place was someone who saw me as nothing more than a hurdle to his desires. That night, as I lay awake, the weight of my decision heavy on my chest, I knew there was no going back. Martin had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I would no longer be a prisoner in my own life. The days after discovering Martin's betrayal were a blur of anger and disillusionment. Each morning, I awoke to the stark reality of my solitary struggle. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with the silence of betrayal. I busied myself with the mundane tasks of daily life, but my mind was elsewhere, consumed with thoughts of Martin's deceit. The images from the investigator's report haunted me, a constant reminder of his infidelity. One evening, as I was going through old photo albums, a picture of our wedding day caught my eye. We looked so happy, so in love. I couldn't help but wonder where it had all gone wrong. Was it gradual, or had there been a specific moment when Martin decided I was no longer enough for him? My train of thought was interrupted by a call from Peter, our son. "Hey, Mom, how are you holding up?" "I'm managing, Peter," I replied, trying to sound stronger than I felt. There was a pause before he spoke again, his voice laced with concern. "Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe I should come home for a while, help you through this." His offer touched me deeply, but I couldn't let him put his life on hold for me. "No, Peter, you need to focus on your studies. I'll be fine." But Peter was insistent. "Mom, this isn't just about you. Dad's actions affect me too. I need to be there for you." His determination was a balm to my wounded heart. Despite Martin's absence, Peter had grown into a caring and responsible young man. His support gave me strength, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so alone. A few days later, Peter arrived. His presence filled the house with a much-needed energy. We spent hours talking, sharing our thoughts and feelings about Martin and the situation at hand. "It's just so selfish, Mom. How could Dad do this to us?" Peter's anger mirrored my own. "I don't know, Peter, but I do know that we can't let his actions destroy us. We're stronger than that." As we talked, a plan began to form in my mind. Martin had taken so much from us, it was time he understood the consequences of his actions. I wasn't going to be the silent victim anymore. It was time for Martin to face the music. The following week, I met with a lawyer to discuss the possibility of divorce. The lawyer, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Hammond, listened intently as I recounted the events of the past few weeks. "Mrs. Harper, based on what you've told me, you have a strong case for divorce, especially with the evidence of infidelity," she said, her tone professional yet empathetic. I nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over me. This was really happening. I was taking the first step towards freeing myself from Martin's shadow. As I left Mrs. Hammond's office, a newfound sense of purpose filled me. I was no longer the woman who waited silently for her husband to return. I was Elaine Harper, and I was going to take control of my life. But as I stood there looking out at the bustling city streets, a part of me couldn't help but mourn the loss of the life I thought I had. The happy family, the loving husband, it was all an illusion, shattered by the harsh light of reality. As I headed home, I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Martin had underestimated me for the last time. The revelation of Martin's affair had set a fire within me, one that burned with the need for justice and retribution. As I sat in our living room, the walls seemed to close in on me, each family portrait a reminder of the facade our life had become. My resolve was tested one evening when Martin called. His voice, once familiar and comforting, now grated on my nerves. "Elaine, I've been thinking. Maybe I was too harsh. We should talk when I get back." His words, meant to soothe, only fueled my anger. "Talk? After everything you've done? You abandoned your family, Martin." "Elaine, you're overreacting. It's not like I planned this. Things just happened," he replied, his tone dismissive, as if his betrayal was a mere inconvenience. "Things just happened? You make it sound like you had no choice in the matter. You chose to be with another woman. You chose to ignore your own parents' funeral." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, I thought he had hung up. Then he spoke, his voice cold. "I don't have time for this, Elaine. I have important work here." That was the last straw. "Important work? Is that what you call abandoning your family? You know what, Martin? Maybe it's time I made some important decisions of my own." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. It was time for action. The next day, I met with Sarah, the private investigator. "We need more evidence, anything that can help in the divorce proceedings," I told her, my voice firm. Sarah nodded, understanding the assignment. "I'll see what I can dig up. Martin won't know what hit him." Over the next few weeks, Sarah provided me with a steady stream of evidence. Photos, emails, and even testimonies from people who had seen Martin with his mistress. It was more than enough to paint a clear picture of his infidelity. Armed with this information, I met with Mrs. Hammond again. She reviewed the evidence, her expression grim. "This will certainly help your case, Mrs. Harper. It seems Mr. Harper has been quite careless." As we discussed the next steps, a plan began to take shape. Martin had always been proud of his reputation, both personally and professionally. It was time to use that against him. "Mrs. Hammond, I want to make sure Martin feels the consequences of his actions, not just legally, but personally and professionally as well." Mrs. Hammond regarded me with a new level of respect. "I understand, Mrs. Harper. We'll make sure he gets what he deserves." When Martin finally returned home, it was to a cold and unwelcoming house. I greeted him with divorce papers, my expression as hard as the resolve within me. "Elaine, what is this?" he asked, his voice a mix of surprise and annoyance. "It's over, Martin. I'm filing for divorce, and before you try to talk your way out of this, know that I have enough evidence to ruin you." Martin's face turned a shade paler, his usual confident demeanor crumbling. "You wouldn't dare," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I dare, Martin. I dare to stand up for myself and for our son. You've made your choices, and now you'll live with the consequences." As he read through the papers, his face twisted in anger and disbelief. But there was no going back. I had drawn the line, and there was no crossing it. That night, as Martin packed his bags and left, I felt a sense of liberation. The chains of our loveless marriage were finally broken. I was free, free to start anew, free from the lies and deceit that had bound me for so long. As I watched him drive away, a sense of justice filled me. This was just the beginning. Martin would soon learn that his actions had consequences, consequences that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The days following Martin's departure were filled with a tumultuous mix of emotions. Anger, relief, and a sense of vindication swirled within me. The house, now void of his presence, felt larger, as if it too had been holding its breath under his oppressive shadow. My resolve was tested when I received a call from Martin, his tone a mix of anger and desperation. "Elaine, you're ruining me. The divorce papers, the allegations. Do you realize what you're doing?" His words were like fuel to my fire. "Yes, Martin, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm showing the world who you really are." "You can't do this to me. I've worked hard for everything I have," he argued, his voice laced with entitlement. "Worked hard? You mean you've lied and cheated your way through our marriage? You've made your bed, Martin. Now you have to lie in it." Martin's voice rose, a crescendo of frustration and disbelief. "You were nothing before me. You think you can just take everything?" I felt a surge of power at his words. "I was nothing? No, Martin. I was everything you didn't appreciate. And now I'm taking back what's mine." The call ended with Martin's threats echoing in my ears, but they no longer held any power over me. I was done being the victim. As the divorce proceedings began, Martin's true nature became evident for all to see. His attempts to hide assets and slander me only served to damage his reputation further. The evidence Sarah had gathered painted a clear picture of his deceit and infidelity. The court hearings were tense, with Martin's lawyers trying every trick in the book. But Mrs. Hammond was a force to be reckoned with, countering their moves with precision and finesse. Throughout it all, Peter stood by my side, his support unwavering. He had grown disillusioned with his father, the truth eroding any semblance of respect he once held. The day the divorce was finalized was a day of liberation. As the judge declared our marriage dissolved, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had won, not just the divorce, but my freedom from Martin's shadow. After the court session, Martin approached me, a shell of the man he once was. "Elaine, please, we can still fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and what I saw was a man broken by his own arrogance. "There's nothing left to fix, Martin. You broke everything worth saving." Walking away from him, I felt a chapter of my life closing. The pain, the betrayal, the lies, they were all behind me now. Ahead lay a path of my own making, free from the deceit that had clouded my life for so long. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the world in a warm golden light. It felt like a sign, a promise of new beginnings and brighter days ahead. I turned to Peter, a smile spreading across my face. "Let's go home, son. We have a new life to start." And with that, we walked away, leaving Martin and the past where they belonged, behind us. With the divorce finalized, I was determined to reveal the extent of Martin's disgrace to those who had been blinded by his facade. I knew that true justice wouldn't come from the courts alone. It had to come from exposing him to the world. I started by reaching out to our mutual friends, people who had known us as a couple for years. The initial reactions were mixed, with some refusing to believe the truth, but I had evidence, undeniable proof of his infidelity and deceit. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. One evening, I invited a few friends over, people who had doubted me initially. As they sat in my living room, I showed them the messages and pictures Sarah had gathered. Shock and disbelief filled the room as they saw Martin's true colors laid bare. One friend, Lisa, shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe I defended him all this time. He's a monster." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. He fooled us all, but now you know. Lisa was the first to take action. She contacted others in our social circle, sharing the evidence and urging them to reconsider their alliances. Soon, the once seemingly impenetrable wall of support around Martin began to crumble. One by one, our friends distanced themselves from him, appalled by his actions. The same people who had once admired him now saw him for what he was, a selfish, deceitful man who had no regard for anyone but himself. As Martin's social standing crumbled, he became increasingly isolated. His attempts to salvage his reputation only made things worse, as he lashed out at those who had abandoned him. His once strong network of contacts began to disappear, leaving him with no one to turn to. I watched with a sense of grim satisfaction as the man who had caused me so much pain faced the consequences of his actions. It wasn't enough for him to lose his friends. I wanted him to lose everything. One day, I received a call from Martin's former boss, Mr. Reynolds. He had heard about the divorce and the scandal surrounding Martin. Elaine, I had no idea. I can't believe he would do such things. I sighed, my voice heavy with exhaustion. It's been a long time coming, Mr. Reynolds. Martin's true nature finally caught up with him. Mr. Reynolds paused, then spoke with a hint of regret. I'm sorry to hear about all of this, but I wanted to let you know that Martin's behavior at the company has also come to light. We've decided to terminate his employment. I felt a rush of vindication. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. It's about time he faced the consequences. As the news of Martin's termination spread, his world crumbled further. He had lost his job, his friends, and his reputation. It was a fall from grace that he couldn't recover from. But I wasn't done yet. I had one final move to make, one that would ensure Martin paid for his actions in the most significant way possible. With Martin's world in shambles, it was time for the final blow, the ultimate revenge that would ensure he paid for his sins. I had discovered a hidden secret during the divorce proceedings, one that would bring him to his knees. Late one evening, as I sat in my quiet home, I made the call I had been dreading but also eagerly anticipating. The voice on the other end was familiar, cold, and detached. Martin, we need to talk. There was a long pause before he replied, his voice wary. What do you want, Elaine? I want justice, Martin. I want you to pay for everything you've done. My words were deliberate, each one carrying the weight of my anger and determination. Martin chuckled, a mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. You think you can do anything to me now? I've lost it all, Elaine. What more could you possibly take from me? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I know about your hidden accounts, Martin, the offshore ones you thought were safe. I have the evidence, and I'm not afraid to expose you. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I could hear the panic in his voice when he finally responded. How did you? That's not important right now, I interrupted. What matters is that I have the power to ruin you completely. The authorities will be very interested in those accounts, Martin. His voice trembled as he spoke, desperation creeping in. What do you want, Elaine? Money? Is that what this is about? I couldn't help but laugh. A bitter and vindictive sound. Money won't fix the damage you've done, Martin. But it will ensure you suffer for a long time. I outlined my terms, a substantial portion of his hidden wealth to be transferred to me as compensation for the years of pain and betrayal. Martin had no choice but to agree, his voice defeated. As I hung up the phone, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Martin had lost everything, his job, his reputation, and now his secret wealth. He was a broken man, a shadow of his former self. But I had won. I had taken back control of my life, exposed him for the monster he was, and ensured that he would pay for his actions. It was a sweet victory, one that had been a long time coming. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my own dignity and self-worth. I had emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever. As I sat alone in my quiet home, I couldn't help but smile. The nightmare was finally over, and I was free to live my life on my terms. Martin's downfall was a satisfying end to a chapter of my life that I was more than ready to leave behind. The crumpled eviction notice slipped from my fingers, fluttering softly to the polished wood floors. I stared at the offensive piece of paper, bile rising in my throat as I absorbed the callous words. Your continued occupation of the premises is no longer welcomed. Vacate within 30 days or legal action will be pursued. No name, no explanation, just a cold command typed out on my mother-in-law's letterhead. After 12 years of living in this house, I was being kicked to the curb like yesterday's trash. I shook my head sharply, as if trying to wake myself from this nightmare. But the stark black words on the page remained unchanged. Marlene did this. It had to be her. Ever since I married her precious son Theo 5 years ago, she had made her disdain for me abundantly clear. In her esteemed opinion, I was too common, too plain, and too barren to be a fitting wife. My fingers curled into fists as hot anger flooded my chest. This went beyond petty grievances with the overbearing matriarch. No, Theo had to be complicit in this scheme to cast me out of my own home. The man I loved and trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Bile continued to rise in my throat as my mind raced over the past few months. The growing distance between Theo and I, the lengthening work hours, the mysterious phone calls he would abruptly end whenever I entered the room. Like puzzle pieces clicking into place, it all started to make horrible sense. I sank down onto the cold marble floors, the eviction notice still glaring relentlessly from where it had landed. Hugo, my tabby cat, nudged his head against my elbow, disturbed by the dark storm clouds gathering around me. I stroked his back reflexively, drawing comfort from his warm, rumbling purr. At least I still had Hugo on my side. That was more than I could say for my traitorous husband and his insidious mother. As I sat there, the 12 years I had spent in this house washed over me like a tide. Theo presenting me with the key the day after our honeymoon, beaming with pride to make me mistress of this magnificent estate. Long summer days lounging by the pool with my friends, glasses of crisp rosé in hand. Curled up with Theo by the crackling fire on winter nights, safe in the circle of his strong arms, I swallowed hard past the lump in my throat. Were all those memories just pretty illusions? Had my marriage to Theo been nothing but an elaborate sham this entire time? The painted walls around me now seemed like a gilded cage, trapping me inside a role I no longer played. Mistress of the manor, lady of the house. Those titles had been ripped away, replaced now with unwelcome occupant. Everything I had known, this house, my marriage, my hopes of starting a family one day, had been built on quicksand. And now I was sinking into an abyss of anger, betrayal, and bone-deep hurt. I rose on wobbly legs, shaking off Hugo's concerned nudges. Padding quietly through the empty halls, I entered my bedroom with trepidation. Theo's smells still lingered. His musky cologne, the peppermint hair gel he used religiously each morning. But for the first time, those familiar scents made my stomach curdle with resentment instead of affection. I sank down on the massive 4-poster bed, its plush duvet suddenly feeling frivolous and wasteful. I should have known a marriage crafted from convenience instead of passion could never withstand the tests of time. Theo had needed a polite, presentable wife to silence his mother's complaints. I had needed financial security after my first failed marriage left me penniless. On paper, we made perfect sense. But the contracts of marriage run deeper than what's on paper. They require trust, communication, compromise, all things painfully absent from my relationship with Theo. I rose and began yanking open dresser drawers, no longer caring about the racket I was making. Let them hear what damage their callous actions had wrought. I recklessly swept aside neat stacks of ironed clothing, not even folding them properly in my haste. My hands closed around the fake bottom I had installed in his drawer years ago. Popping it open, I retrieved the flash drive concealed beneath, clutching it tightly. If Theo thought he could discard me so easily, he was sorely mistaken. I was taking this insurance policy with me. I woke with a start, momentarily confused by my unfamiliar surroundings. Rather than the king-size sleigh bed I'd shared with Theo, I was curled up on the lumpy sofa bed in my tiny rental apartment. The previous day came crashing back, the confrontation with Theo over my eviction, my furious packing, his half-hearted excuses about financial difficulties. I had spat back that money seemed plentiful enough for him to afford a fancy new condo for his mistress. Theo's face had drained of color. Who told you that? He sputtered. I found out all on my own, I hissed. I know you've been siphoning money from our accounts for months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $10,000 a month disappearing? He raked a hand through his hair, refusing to meet my livid gaze. Alara, I swear, she didn't mean anything to me. It was just a stupid fling. Save it, I snapped, clenching my fist so I wouldn't succumb to my urge to slap him. This isn't about her. This is about you lying to my face, betraying our vows, and deceiving me. I turned on my heel, abandoning him to deal with the movers. My departure was satisfyingly dramatic, but my triumph soon faded, replaced by bone-deep hurt and anger. I rose unsteadily from the lumpy couch, my back protesting yesterday's frenzied activity. At least Theo's credit card had been useful for furnishing this depressingly bare apartment. I hoped the $5,000 bill gave him a nice slap in the face. I filled Hugo's food bowl on autopilot, my thoughts churning darkly. How could I have missed all the signs these past few months? Thinking back, it was painfully obvious. Theo's late nights at work, his constant distraction whenever we talked, the locked study I was now barred from entering. An icy sensation trickled down my spine. The locked study. In my hurried packing yesterday, I'd forgotten to retrieve my laptop stashed in there. Cursing under my breath, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Time for another unwanted trip to the scene of this betrayal. Maybe I'd accidentally smashed something expensive on my way out. 20 minutes later, I stood outside the formidable wrought iron gates that marked the entrance to what used to be my home. I stared bitterly at the ostentatious double doors and sprawling columns. What a fool I'd been, thinking I belonged behind those gilded walls. Squaring my shoulders, I strode up the winding driveway, steeling myself for another confrontation. Before I could knock, the door was wrenched open abruptly. Marlene's piercing eyes raked over me disdainfully. "Well, well, I thought I made myself clear about you not being welcome here anymore," she said coldly. Behind her tailored skirt and silk blouse, I caught a glimpse of suitcases stacked in the foyer. My eyes narrowed. "Going somewhere, Marlene? That's none of your concern. State your business and then kindly leave." I crossed my arms. "I need to get some personal items from the study. It will just take a moment." Over her shoulder, I noticed Theo descending the curved staircase, his normal polish slightly diminished. His suit was badly wrinkled and his face sallow and drawn, but my long dormant sympathy remained buried deep. He had made his bed by betraying our marriage. Now he could lie in it. "Let her get her things, Mother," he said tiredly, avoiding my accusatory stare. Might as well avoid another scene. Marlene huffed in annoyance but remained stubbornly blocking the doorway. Sighing, I shouldered past her roughly. Her affronted gasp followed me as I stormed down the hallway to the locked study. Fishing the key from my bag with trembling fingers, I shoved it in the lock vindictively. As expected, the study was in complete disarray. Papers scattered, drawers hanging open haphazardly, remnants of my missing belongings strewn across the floor. I spotted my laptop under a chair and quickly stashed it in my bag. As I turned to leave, I paused, struck by the chaotic sight. Something wasn't adding up. Marlene's packed suitcases, this ransacked room. It hinted at something much darker lurking beneath the surface. I slowly circled the room, taking in details that eluded me during my angry packing frenzy yesterday. Bank statements and unopened bills littered the floor alongside flashy jewelry store receipts. My investigator's instincts, dormant since my divorce attorney days, switched on. Methodically sorting through the paper trails, a shocking narrative emerged. Excessive spending well beyond our means, panicked credit card applications clearly denied, final foreclosure warnings from the bank. Rocking back on my heels, I struggled to absorb this new reality on top of yesterday's revelations. Not only had Theo betrayed our marriage, but his reckless spending had torpedoed us into financial ruin without my knowledge. No wonder Marlene was so desperate to cast me out of her perfect palace. Clutching the damning evidence to my chest, I strode out of the study with newfound purpose. Theo and Marlene had played me for a fool, manipulating me like their own personal puppet. But the show was over. This victim had found her voice, and there would be hell to pay. Armed with the damning evidence tucked securely in my bag, I strode towards the front door with righteous fury pumping through my veins. Theo and Marlene had treated me like a disposable pawn for too long. Now it was time for their despicable web of lies to come crashing down. Marlene blocked my way as I tried to storm past, her talon-like nails digging into my forearm. "Just where do you think you're going with those private documents?" she hissed. I wrenched my arm free, getting right in her pinched face. First, don't ever touch me again. Second, your financial records stopped being private when you used my name to take out massive loans. I'm taking this evidence and contacting my divorce lawyer. Theo rushed over, his tired eyes wide with panic. Alara, please, be reasonable. We're undergoing a temporary cash flow issue, that's all. Mother has already made arrangements to cover it. His platitudes only stoked my rage hotter. Oh, so pilfering my personal accounts without consent and racking up secret credit card debt constitutes just a minor issue in your book? I scoffed bitterly. I saw the denied applications and final foreclosure notices, Theo. Your lies stop here. Theo paled while Marlene's painted lips flattened into a hard line, her beady eyes shooting daggers. I almost laughed at how the perfectly coiffed vulture resembled a ruffled hen with her feathers in a bunch. You clearly don't grasp the gravity of this situation, Marlene bit out. My son is facing financial ruin if word of this gets out. Is dragging our family name through the mud really necessary just to satisfy some petty revenge fantasy? Red-hot anger licked through my veins. This woman dared insinuate I would invent financial crime just for revenge? Before I could retort, she charged on, clutching Theo close to her bony chest. All my son did was try to maintain a lifestyle you eagerly enjoyed the fruits of for years. And how do you repay that generosity? By exposing his understandable missteps to bring us all down out of spite. Theo gently extricated himself from her claw-like grip. Alara has a right to be upset, Mother, he said tiredly, still refusing to meet my eyes. I should have been honest about our situation from the start. I crossed my arms, unswayed by his half-hearted display of accountability. Well, it's too little, too late for that now. I'm contacting my lawyer this afternoon to file for divorce. And I won't hesitate to disclose evidence of fraud. Marlene's bony hand flew to her throat dramatically, while Theo slumped against the wall. For all their pretenses of power and control, one whiff of consequences had them quaking in their expensive Italian leather shoes. Pathetic. I stepped forward until only inches separated me from Marlene's wild eyes. Here are your options. You can contest the divorce and force this evidence into public record, destroying what remains of your family name and fortune. Or you can sign the papers, providing me a reasonable settlement, and pray I show mercy by staying silent. I strode away, heels clicking crisply on the polished floors. At the front door I paused without turning around. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. The heavy oak door slammed behind me with an air of finality. I slid behind the wheel of my car, hands shaking as I cranked the engine. Now that my adrenaline was fading, the gravity of what just happened sank in. I had confronted my deceitful husband and manipulative mother-in-law head-on. And instead of playing the victim as they expected, I had seized control and dictated the terms going forward. No more cowering or shrinking myself to fit their twisted expectations. The doormat they had trampled on so gleefully was finally demanding respect. As I pulled through the imposing gates onto the quiet suburban street, I caught a glimpse of Hugo's plushy face peeking through the back windshield. My breath hitched in my throat. In the chaos of that toxic household, I had nearly forgotten about my sweet Tabby. An unfamiliar sensation pricked behind my eyelids. I swiped at them fiercely as I accelerated down the tree-lined road. How could I have left my loyal companion, my sole source of comfort during many lonely nights, alone with those monsters? What kind of guardian abandons her defenseless kitty like that? My hands clenched the wheel tightly. Enough second-guessing myself. There would be plenty of time for regret later. Right now, I needed to focus and stick to the plan. I would wrap up my affairs quickly and efficiently before setting us both free from this toxic situation. Soon, sweet Hugo and I would be far away, starting fresh in a place where no one knew our names. Just a woman and her cat against the world. Terrifying, yes. But anything seemed better than staying trapped in this twisted web of betrayal and lies. 2 weeks had passed since I stormed out of Theo and Marlene's den of lies. In that time, I had booked us 2 one-way tickets far away from this town and its superficial social scene. Somewhere I could remake myself without judgmental eyes tracking my every move. The divorce was progressing rapidly now that Theo had acquiesced to my demands, perhaps hoping I would show mercy if he played nicely. but I harbored no misguided sympathy for the man who had deceived and used me for years. His pleas for another chance now rang hollow when I reflected on all the nights I had cried myself to sleep, wondering what I did wrong, why I couldn't get pregnant, no matter how hard we tried. At least I found grim satisfaction in witnessing his empire of lies crumble. Without my financial contributions and social connections, Theo's business deals rapidly dried up. Under scrutiny from investors about some accounting discrepancies, his scheming mother was booted from the board of directors, losing her seat of domineering power. She had always prioritized profits over ethics. Now, with their dirty laundry aired like musty old sheets, the Jennings name attracted only wary side eyes and hushed gossip instead of envy. Good riddance. Let the vultures circle and the wolves descend. They made this bed. Now they could lie in the ruins that remained. The day before my departure, I found myself reluctantly driving past the cul-de-sac that once led to such a grand house of lies. Grim satisfaction flooded me at the sight of the imposing wrought-iron gates now obstructed with somber eviction signs rather than luxurious gardens. But peering closer, I spotted an elderly woman lingering alone with her suitcase on the sidewalk, wildly dialing some number. As she turned, recognition slammed me in the gut. Marlene's once commanding presence had diminished into a frail, defeated shell of her former self. Her arrogance had crumpled alongside the financial empire she was so proud of. An uncomfortable twinge stirred in my chest before I quashed it down. I owed that woman nothing, least of all my pity or sympathy. Her own ruthless ambition had led her here. I intend to drive on, leaving Marlene surrounded by the ruins of everything her vile plots had built. But Hugo meowed loudly, gazing back with imploring eyes. Cursing myself for a soft-hearted fool, I pulled to the curb and lowered the passenger window. "Do you need some help?" I asked baldly, still unwilling to show warmth despite her circumstances. Marlene started at my voice before gathering herself hurriedly. "We had to vacate the premises so the bank could take inventory for auction," she said stiffly. I sighed. Even now, unable to ask for help outright. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Her fingers fidgeted with her ostentatious wedding ring, the impressive diamonds now looking gaudy and excessive. "I was meant to stay with my cousin Gerald for the time being, but it appears his hospitality has expired." My mouth flattened into a thin line. Even her own family was fed up dealing with the fallout from her machinations. And Theo clearly wasn't around to handle his discarded mess of a mother. Another impatient meow decided me. "Put your bag in the back next to Hugo. You can stay with me until you figure something else out." Surprise flickered across her tight features. "That is quite an unexpected gesture after, well, everything." I shrugged, unwilling to rehash the past. "I'm leaving town tomorrow anyway. Consider us temporary roommates." I left the implied time frame of 24 hours or less hanging between us. The drive to my tiny rental passed in silence until we pulled into the faded lot. Marlene took in the cracked paint and missing shingles with thinly veiled distaste. "It has a certain rustic charm," she ventured half-heartedly before following me inside. I busied myself pouring food for Hugo, who had taken an immediate liking to our new houseguest. Meanwhile, Marlene lingered awkwardly before perching on the very edge of the couch. Our forced intimacy felt surreal after over a decade of cold disregard from both sides. As we picked at leftover takeout later on, polite strains of conversation gave way to candid reflections about the future, prompted perhaps by the bottle of wine I dug up. I discovered Marlene's dream of teaching music one day. In turn, I confessed my burning desire to move somewhere warm and sunny, far removed from the Illumina social fishbowl, to take up gardening. For a few strange hours, we were just two souls making sense of life's wreckage, minus the history of wounds and grudges between us. But the wine eventually dwindled along with our stilted camaraderie. As we turned in for the night, tomorrow's uncertainties settled back upon us like a leaden weight. I jolted awake the next morning, momentarily forgetting about my unexpected houseguest. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee drew me out to the cramped kitchenette. Marlene stood rigidly by the ancient stove, wisps of gray hair escaping her normally immaculate updo. "I hope you don't mind me taking the liberty of preparing breakfast," she said uncertainly. I shrugged, accepting the proffered mug. "Thanks. I'm not much of a cook anyway." As we ate yogurt and granola in awkward silence, I mulled over this surreal situation. Just yesterday, Marlene was an iconic socialite. Today she was humbled and adrift, taking refuge in my modest rental. Fate certainly loved poetic twists, the haughty queen dethroned and dependent on a princess she had scorned for years. I couldn't deny feeling a slight buzz of schadenfreude watching Marlene in yesterday's rumpled Chanel grimace at the dated avocado appliances. I cleared our dishes brusquely, anxious to escape this strange familiarity. Marlene lingered at the table, gnawing her lip. "Have you given any thought to what comes next, after?" Her unspoken words hung heavy between us. After she left here, after I moved away to start fresh, after the final guillotine blade of divorce severed me from the only life I'd known for 12 years. I scrubbed the plates harder, avoiding her piercing gaze as I pretended fascination with a bit of stuck egg. The truth was I actively resisted peering too far down the lonely road of singlehood stretching before me. Despite everything, searing pain gripped my heart, imagining never seeing Theo's crooked smile first thing in the morning, or hearing his off-key singing in the shower. Through betrayal and deception, parts of me still clung to the comforting refuge of us. Of course, I couldn't confess these weak sentiments to Marlene. Clearing my throat roughly, I turned to face her with forced conviction. "I have a flight booked to Arizona for later today. Once there, I'll start job hunting so I can afford a small place just for me and Hugo." My voice hitched slightly over our names. Eventually, I might even try dating again, but for now, it's enough to just live simply without toxic people around. I expected Marlene to flinch at the thinly veiled barb. Instead, her eyes softened with what looked strangely like empathy. "The future is often murkier than our best-laid plans anticipate," she said slowly. "Perhaps if I had adopted your openness to unexpected possibilities years ago, things would have played out quite differently." I raised a skeptical eyebrow, certain this was a transparent attempt to diminish her culpability. But Marlene raised a staying hand. "You owe me nothing, least of all an audience for my regrets. Suffice it to say that pride and fear of vulnerability blinded me to what truly mattered until it was too late." She glanced down, blinking rapidly, while I shifted awkwardly. I had steeled myself to confront Marlene's haughty indifference once more, only to be thrown by this display of humility. But I hesitantly filled the silence, voicing a question that had plagued me for years. "Why did you dislike me so intensely from the beginning? I tried everything to win your approval and make Theo happy." My voice cracked pathetically on his name. So much for indifference. Marlene seemed to fold into herself, and for the first time I glimpsed hints of a heavy burden weighing down her ramrod posture. "You represented warmth, spontaneity, sincerity, everything I lost touch with long ago in my quest for the perfect family image." She gazed out the dingy window. "Rather than inspire me to reconnect with life's joys, your vibrancy only magnified my own isolation, so I sought to diminish what I envied." Her poignant confession landed between us with the weight of a thrown gauntlet, unexpected but impossible to ignore. I sank slowly onto a creaking chair, shoulders slumping, too exhausted to even summon anger over so many wasted years chained to her warped insecurities and judgments. Perhaps sensing my fatigue, Marlene lightly touched my shoulder. "The past can't be altered, but the future awaits whatever we choose to carry forward or leave behind." With that enigmatic remark, she quietly retreated to the bathroom, granting me space to process this overdue revelation. Through the dingy window, I glimpsed my car stuffed with 2 lives haphazardly thrown together, aiming only for distance from the ruins of experience. Gathering courage, I whispered a promise, one life I could still get right. I zipped my bulging suitcase with finality, scanning the cramped room for any last-minute items. Today was an ending, the closing of a chapter filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and finally empowerment. Soon Marlene and I would part ways at the airport to embark on uncertain futures that no longer involved the toxic Jennifer men. Marlene perched elegantly on the sagging sofa, though her normal, perfectly pressed attire was rumpled after a night on the lumpy pullout. I hesitated, feeling I should say something, but uncertain where we stood after last night's emotional conversation. Before the awkward silence could stretch too long, my cell phone lit up with Theo's handsome face. Still conflicted over seeing his smile every day in my photos, I silenced the call. I owed him nothing more, especially on my last day in this godforsaken town. "Let me guess, another pathetic plea for reconciliation?" Marlene asked dryly. When I nodded tersely, her mouth flattened into a hard line. Clearly the consequences of his abhorrent behavior haven't fully penetrated that thick skull yet, if he believes sweet words can erase the past. I bristled slightly at her criticism. Theo cheating didn't negate over a decade together when I still sometimes slipped and thought of him as my partner rather than soon-to-be ex. Sensing my hesitation, Marlene leaned forward, eyes flashing. "Elara, listen to me. Men like Theodore never change. They simply find new victims once the current one finally resists being used and lied to. You deserve so much better, and I won't have you throwing away this fresh start because of some misplaced longing for a man incapable of valuing your beautiful spirit." Her passion threw me. Marlene despised vulnerability, preferring to manipulate scenarios from behind the scenes. This fierce display revealed glimpses of the motherly protector she kept buried beneath ambition and stone-faced control. Seeing warmth emanating from someone I had long dismissed as an icy villain both rattled and touched me. Rather than grapple with complex feelings, I straightened briskly and reached for my suitcase. "We should get going. I still need to drop you at the airport." The drive passed swiftly as we purposefully avoided tender topics or future plans. But pulling up to the terminal's bustling curb, melancholy still permeated the cramped space. Our paths were unlikely to ever cross again after today. Nostalgia flickered briefly for the friends we could have been under different circumstances before I quashed it down. No point getting mired in fruitless what-ifs. I climbed out and retrieved her small bag from the back seat. Facing each other squarely for likely the last time, echoes of the past hovered ghostly between us. Years of rivalry and resentment now faded into exhaustion and regret in the light of present upheaval. Surprising us both, I stepped forward and briefly hugged Marlene's fragile frame, feeling sharp shoulder blades under my palms. She squeezed back tightly for a breath before drawing up sternly, lips quivering slightly. With a mute nod that conveyed volumes, she walked briskly through the sliding doors without a backward glance. Watching her departure, I exhaled slowly, unexpectedly feeling lighter and oddly at peace. The bitter old vulture had faced her long overdue reckoning, but the broken woman moving cautiously into an uncertain future now seemed unshackled from former bonds of perfectionism. I lingered a few moments more in the idling car, staring sightlessly across the bustling lanes of traffic. Then Hugo meowed insistently from his carrier, jolting me from troubled thoughts. Our new life awaited far from this place of ghosts and shadows. After dropping Hugo at the special pet boarding area with strict personalized care instructions, I headed toward the crowded security queues. But barely 20 steps later, familiar polished loafers appeared in my peripheral vision. I halted abruptly, heart pounding. How dare he ambush me here when I had made my wishes for no contact perfectly clear? I pivoted slowly to face Theo, taking savage satisfaction as his innately poised countenance wavered under my blistering glare. The weeks following my departure had clearly taken their toll. His Armani suit, hung loosely off a gaunt frame and stubble, peppered his normally smooth jaw. But I staunchly barricaded any softening behind bitter memories of his callous betrayals. Drawing myself up rigidly, I brushed past him without a word, refusing to indulge this confrontation or be manipulated yet again by his excuses and platitudes. But his hand gently caught my wrist, halting my furious momentum. "Elara, please wait. I know you owe me nothing after how despicably I acted. But we meant too much once for it to end this bitterly without closure. Just hear me out, and then I'll accept whatever choice you make." I wavered. His simple dignity contrasted starkly with prior vigorous denials. Sensing my hesitation, Theo guided us gently to an empty waiting area, his familiar earthy scent briefly distracting, before I caught myself leaning closer instinctively. No more damning self-deceptions. I would hear him out, but my erstwhile prince had forever forfeited the privilege of my trust. Settling reluctantly across from him, I crossed my arms and waited. Theo fiddled with his silver wedding band, gathering courage under my expectant stare. When the stretching silence became unbearable, I prompted impatiently, "Well, you insisted on this intrusion, so talk." He raked a hand through prematurely graying hair. You deserve the full truth about her. About everything. My nails carved crescents into my palms. That wounds were still so raw, even her pronoun felt like lemon juice, highlighted my pathetic inability to move on fully. Sensing my lingering fragility, Theo's eyes softened. Alara, she never mattered. Not like you. It was just a stupid conquest to feel young again with too much booze and flattering attention. I cut him off sharply. Your asinine midlife crisis doesn't justify the deliberate choosing of infidelity. You squandered precious years we can't recover. My voice broke on the last word. You're completely right. Nothing forgives what I did. Theo stared beseechingly into my eyes, but hardest to admit has been facing the underlying reason this recklessness felt so compelling. He took a shuddering breath. I was terrified of truly being there for you emotionally after the last miscarriage. Easier to escape into late nights at bars rather than wrestle with feeling like a failure as your husband. Unwelcome sympathy pricked my conscience, hearing the depth of his private demons before I set my jaw firmly. His weakness didn't exonerate deeply scarring betrayal. Sensing he hadn't earned the right to my absolution yet, Theo leaned forward urgently. That day you collapsed in the foyer, I ignored 10 panicked messages from Julian to jet off with her instead. What kind of man abandons his wife unconscious and bleeding? His broad shoulders shook with rare vulnerable emotion. The affair ended that very night once guilt overruled the thrill of pretended escape. But like a coward, I just doubled down on secrets instead of confessing. Despite myself, hot tears trailed down my face at the excruciating image. Seeing my distress, he cautiously extended a tentative hand. When I didn't pull away, he enveloped my icy fingers in consoling warmth. Alara Jennings, you have been my steadfast anchor through lost jobs, family deaths, all of it. His thumbs gently traced my knuckles. I destroyed everything good through my own weakness in failing you, and no words can ever heal that pain. He squeezed my hands softly, meeting my eyes with heartbreaking sincerity. I just needed you to know your immeasurable worth before our paths diverge for good. I stared sightlessly over his shoulder, struggling desperately to shore up crumbling defenses against this tender onslaught. But Theo misinterpreted my silence and withdrew hastily. Forgive my selfishness keeping you any longer. I wish you all the joy and peace going forward that you deserve. He made to stand before I gave in to the magnetic pull I had resisted for endless lonely weeks, and grabbed his wrist wordlessly. Our joined hands spoke of lingering ghosts not fully exorcised, despite determined intentions to walk away whole and healed. Come with me to grab lunch before my flight, I whispered hoarsely. We both could use the company. His eyes lit up with notes of irrepressible hope that caught traitorously in my weary heart. We meandered slowly through garishly lit terminals with hands loosely linked, the familiar intimacy both comforting and piercing after so many silent nights, strangling on angry tears into my pillow. As we dwelled in this peaceful eye in the storm of separation, I dared acknowledge how perfectly our hands still fit together, if only for a few stolen moments more. But crossing the bustling departure hall, reality intruded as my terminal flashed insistently on the screen above. I lingered reluctantly, clutching these final grains of before slipped away forever. With strength that surprised us both, I embraced him fiercely, conveying wordlessly echoes of grief over wrecked dreams and forgiveness still under construction. His lips grazed my hair, landing feather-light like a blessing. Walk forward in hope, Theo whispered. Eyes suspiciously bright, he stepped back and raised a hand in silent farewell. I strode steadily to the boarding gate without glancing backward, but as the plane engines roared to life, I pressed my palm against the window, imagining his steadfast silhouette waiting below until distance rendered us strangers once more. I gazed out the dingy bus window as the California desert peeled back, revealing saguaro-dotted vistas under cerulean skies. The burning Golden State sun was just setting behind craggy red peaks. I smiled softly, feeling possibilities stirring within me, like those hardy wildflowers I spotted blanketed alongside the highway, narrowly avoiding the brown desolation. This faded greyhound was miles removed from the privileged illusion of my former life, when spontaneous weekend getaways meant booking a lavish resort suite on Theo's black card, rather than dozing upright with questionable stains on ripped vinyl seats. Yet I had never felt freer than with the wind whipping through cracked windows as I hugged a worn postcard with a hastily circled apartment listing. The ad I had obsessively memorized was for a cozy one-bedroom casita on the outskirts of Tucson, backing up to saguaro forests and sun-baked trails. Affording the $750 monthly rent would require relying on spousal support payments from Theo for a little while longer until I found reliable work. I knew without asking Marlene was getting by on similar temporary lifeboats, whatever settlements our lawyers had wrangled from the former Jennings empire. Pride would just have to cope with necessities for now. My impulsive liberation from toxic security had to transcend fear-based decision-making. I refused to settle in meaningless jobs just for the paycheck. I craved space to rediscover my passions. As the cramped bus navigated the narrow, dusty streets of downtown Tucson after nightfall, I peered out searching for familiar landmarks from the online listing. My eager gaze soon spotted the carved oak tree dead ahead marking my destination. I quickly tugged my worn duffels down, jostling bleary passengers. Scooping up a yowling Hugo, I murmured excitedly to him as we stepped off onto the cracked sidewalk, breathing in creosote and sage-scented air. The promised carved oak stood proudly between two squat adobe homes, seemingly melded with the desert itself. My new neighbor kept a cozy, handcrafted wind chime dangling from gnarled branches that tinkled cheerfully in the warm breeze. Further down the dusty street, lights still burned cozily in low windows as families finished evening meals, faint laughter, and barked dogs echoing through the sleepy neighborhood. Drawing courage from such warm domesticity, I marched up to the small mustard-yellow duplex tucked privately in back, flowers overflowing from rusted barrels flanking the turquoise door. My new landlady, Sylvia, emerged at the sound of gravel crunching under my feet, her deeply lined and weathered face cracking into a brilliant, welcoming smile. Dried lavender sprigs woven through thin braids spilled across her faded peasant blouse as she drew me into an unexpected embrace, redolent of sweet sage and cornmeal. "Alara, so wonderful you made it safe, dear heart. Don't be shy now. Come in, come in. I have your unit all ready for occupants big and small." Her musical voice held echoes of the multicultural Southwest as she scooped up Hugo and cooed nonsense sounds at him. My anxious shoulders relaxed at her easy affection, and within 15 minutes, all my earthly belongings were tucked cozily into the lovingly decorated one-bedroom overlooking fragrant flowering bushes alive with birds. Sylvia proudly demonstrated the shiny oven and gurgling fridge she had picked up secondhand, especially with me in mind, before stuffing my hands with homemade tamales and departing with another fierce hug. Alone in the tiny haven, emotion swamped me as I sunk down on the quilted sofa, staring sightlessly at azure walls and the vibrant paintings adorning them. After so many years existing elegantly in Marlene's cold shadow, I was finally home, somewhere that felt utterly mine alone, to nurture growth rather than shrink small for approval. I didn't bother fighting grateful tears, let them flow freely to cleanse old wounds so something fresh and resilient could take root. Even Theo's framed face smiling down from my bedside table no longer constricted my heart as it once had. Simply a bittersweet reminder that seasons change, but the essence of who we are remains if we nurture truth within. Curled under a faded quilt watching the moon rise with Hugo purring softly beside me, I made a silent pledge. Never again would anyone dictate my worth or potential. I was finally choosing to live rather than just survive. To embrace life's messy evolution on my own terms, with arms flung open wide. Tomorrow's unknowns no longer sparked fear, but rather anticipation, blooming brightly like those desert wildflowers daring to blossom against adversity. Tonight, I simply rested in my decision to thrive freely, under boundless western skies, ready to greet a new dawn. The sun greeted me warmly that morning, a rare treat after weeks of dreary weather. My hands, wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, were still as I stood in the garden, admiring the newly blossomed roses. It was a perfect holiday morning, serene and promising, until the peace was shattered by the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. Richard, my husband of 10 years, stepped out of the car, followed closely by his sister Anna. They were an odd pair, Richard with his stern-lined face and Anna ever the carefree spirit, albeit with a cunning glint in her eyes. They were laden with bags, their arms straining under the weight. I set my cup down, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. "Richard, what's all this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Richard's response was blunt, like a sledgehammer to my calm morning. "We're moving in with you from today," he declared, as Anna smirked beside him. I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What do you mean moving in, and why?" Anna's smirk widened. "If you don't like it, Helen, you can always divorce him and leave," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Before I could gather my wits to respond, they barged past me, their footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. My once tranquil living room was quickly cluttered with their belongings. I stood frozen, watching the invasion of my personal space, my sanctuary. Just then, Mia, Anna's 14-year-old daughter, entered the room. Her eyes, a mirror image of her mother's, were filled with apology. Unlike Anna, Mia had always been gentle, a flower struggling to bloom in the shadow of her mother's overpowering presence. I found my voice, albeit a whisper. "Is this really okay? I mean, with Mia and all?" Richard, who had been directing Anna on where to place her myriad of bags, stopped dead in his tracks. His face, usually an unreadable mask, turned pale. Without a word, he dashed out, his phone pressed against his ear. Anna, now left alone to face me, looked as if she might faint. The arrogance had vanished from her face, replaced by a dawning realization of something gone awry. "I can't wait for Richard to come back," I said, my voice stronger now. Anna flinched at my words. "Brace yourself, Anna. The real fight starts now." As I stood there, facing the chaos, a part of me wondered how my life had spiraled into this mess. I was Helen Davis, a 50-year-old accountant, living a life that was more a routine than an experience. My marriage to Richard, once a source of comfort, had become a suffocating trap. Richard and I met at a community event. He was a local businessman 10 years my senior, and I was a volunteer. We connected over shared interests, and before I knew it, we were married. It was a simple ceremony, Richard insisting that anything more was frivolous. From the start, Richard was a traditionalist. He believed in clear roles within a marriage, and unfortunately that meant I was relegated to the background, my opinions and desires secondary to his. "I'll handle the finances and decisions, you just make sure the house is in order," he would say, his tone final. I complied initially. I thought his dominance was a sign of his commitment and care. But as the years rolled by, the charming businessman I married revealed himself to be controlling and dismissive. Our home, once a haven of shared dreams and laughter, had turned into a silent battlefield. I would tiptoe around his moods and his commands, trying to keep the peace. But inside I was screaming for an escape, for a breath of fresh air. That morning, as I watched Anna spread her belongings across my living room, I felt a surge of anger. This was not just an invasion of space. It was a blatant disregard for my existence, my choices. And Richard, the man who had vowed to cherish and respect me, stood silently by, a spectator to his sister's audacity. Anna's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear. She knew she had crossed a line, but her arrogance was too ingrained to step back. She was like a parasite, feeding off Richard's affection and my tolerance. "I hope you're ready for the consequences, Anna," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her response was a scoff, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew she had awakened a dormant adversary, and as I stood there, amidst the chaos they had brought into my home, I realized that this was not just an invasion. It was a declaration of war. The sound of Richard's car pulling up again snapped me out of my thoughts. I braced myself for the confrontation, for the battle that was about to begin. The doors opened, and Richard stormed in, his face a mask of confusion and anger. "What's going on, Helen?" "Why is Anna panicking?" he demanded, his eyes darting between me and his sister. "This," I gestured to the mess around us, "is what your decision has led to. Your sister, your house, your rules. But not anymore, Richard. Not anymore." The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Richard looked at me, then at Anna, and a realization dawned on him. He had underestimated me, taken my silence for submission. But as the sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the chaos, I knew this was just the beginning of my fight for freedom, for my voice. The shadows of retribution were finally lifting, and I was ready to step into the light. Richard's confusion melted into a frown, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the scene before him. "Helen, this is temporary. Anna needs us," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. I scoffed. "Temporary? Richard, your sister has brought half her house here. And you," I turned to Anna, "you waltz in here as if you own the place." Anna rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, come on, Helen. It's not like you use this space for anything important. Besides, Richard agrees with me, don't you, brother?" Richard nodded, his allegiance clear. "Anna's going through a tough time. We need to be there for her." I felt a surge of anger. "And what about me, Richard? When have you ever considered what I need?" Richard's expression hardened. "You have everything you need, Helen. A roof over your head, food on the table. What more do you want?" His words stung, and I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. "I want a husband who sees me as an equal, not just a caretaker for his home and his burdensome sister." Anna snorted. "Equal? Please. You should be grateful Richard even married you. At your age, options aren't exactly lining up." Her words were like a slap in the face, but I stood my ground. "Grateful? For a marriage that suffocates me? For a husband who values his sister's whims over his wife's feelings?" Richard's face reddened, his anger boiling over. "Enough, Helen. You're overreacting. Anna is family." "And what am I?" I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. "Just a convenient accessory to your life?" The room fell silent, the tension thick and suffocating. Richard and Anna exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. I knew then that I was fighting a losing battle. Richard finally spoke, his voice cold. "Pack your things, Helen. If you can't accept my sister, you can't be part of this family." His words were a dagger to my heart, but I refused to let them see me break. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll leave. But remember this, Richard. I am not your property. I am a person, and I will not be dismissed so easily." I turned on my heel and walked to our bedroom, my mind racing. As I began packing my things, tears blurred my vision. I had given up so much for this marriage, only to be cast aside for Anna's selfishness. But amidst the hurt and betrayal, a fire ignited within me. I would not let them break me. I would fight back, and I would reclaim my life. As I zipped up my suitcase, I looked around the room that had been my sanctuary. It was time to leave, to start anew. But as I stepped out of the bedroom, suitcase in tow, I knew one thing for certain. This was not the end. It was just the beginning of my journey to retribution. The door slammed behind me as I left the house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear, anger, and a newfound determination. The crisp morning air was a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere I'd just escaped. I took a moment to steady my breath, realizing that this was the first step towards reclaiming my life. As I walked, the memories of the last few years played in my mind like a tragic movie. Richard, once my rock, had slowly morphed into an unrecognizable tyrant. His sister Anna always lurking in the shadows, influencing his decisions, undermining me at every turn. I found myself outside Mia's school, the realization hitting me that I hadn't said goodbye. Mia, the one ray of light in the otherwise dark canvas of my marriage. I saw her then, walking out of the school gates, her face a picture of innocence and youth. "Mia," I called out, my voice catching in my throat. She turned, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Helen, what are you doing here?" I knelt down to her level, my eyes searching hers. "Mia, I've left your uncle's house. Things have become too difficult." Her face fell, a frown marring her young features. "Is it because of Mom? Did she do something again?" I sighed, hating that she had to be exposed to her mother's toxic behavior. "Yes, Mia. Your mom and your uncle, they've made some decisions that I can't live with." Mia's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "I wish you could stay. You're the only one who listens to me, who cares about what I want." I hugged her, my heart breaking. "I care about you so much, Mia, and I promise I'll always be here for you, no matter what." We stood there for a moment, two souls united in our mutual pain. Finally, I pulled away, wiping her tears. "You need to be strong, Mia. Don't let them change who you are. You're a wonderful, kind-hearted girl, and I'm so proud of you." Mia nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "I will be, Helen, and I'll come to visit you, wherever you are." As I watched her walk back into the school, a plan began to form in my mind. Richard and Anna had underestimated me, seen me as nothing more than a compliant wife, but I would show them. I would fight back, and I would make them pay for every tear, every moment of pain they had caused me. I walked away from the school, my steps more confident than before. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a pawn. I was a queen, ready to take back my kingdom. I found refuge in a small, unassuming cafe, the kind where strangers become confidants. As I sipped my coffee, the warmth of the mug seeped into my hands, mirroring the growing resolve in my heart. It was there, amidst the quiet hum of the cafe, that I began to piece together my plan. A sudden ring from my phone jolted me. It was Mia. "Helen, you need to come to Grandma's house. There's something you should know about Mom." The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. I paid for my coffee and hurried to the address she had given me. Arriving at the quaint house, I was greeted by Mia and her grandparents, Richard and Anna's parents. The air was heavy with tension as they ushered me into the living room. Mia's grandmother, a stern yet kind woman, wasted no time. "Helen, we've been blind for too long. Anna is in trouble, and it's far worse than we imagined." I sat, bracing myself for what was to come. Mia's grandfather, a man of few words, spoke up. "Anna's addicted to gambling. She's amassed a significant debt, and now she's targeting your home to settle it." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Anna's arrogance, her sudden move into our house, it all made sense now. Mia's grandmother continued, her voice laced with regret. "We've enabled her for too long, thinking we were helping. But we were wrong. We're cutting her off financially." I nodded, my mind racing with the implications. "And Richard? Does he know about this?" "He knows," Mia's grandfather said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But he's too blinded by his need to protect Anna. He's part of the problem." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, each one fueling my resolve. I stood up, my decision clear. I need to confront them. They need to know I'm aware of their deceit. Mia grabbed my hand, her eyes pleading. "Be careful, Helen. Mom can be unpredictable." I squeezed her hand, a smile tinged with determination. "Don't worry, Mia. I'm not the same person they think they can push around. It's time they see the real me." Leaving Mia's grandparents' house, I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Anger, certainly, at the betrayal and deceit. But also empowerment, a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. I drove back to the house, each mile bringing me closer to a confrontation I never imagined I'd have the courage to face. But there I was, ready to stand up to the very people who had made my life a living hell. I entered the house without knocking, finding Richard and Anna in the living room. The sight of them, so complacent in their scheming, ignited a fire within me. "Richard, Anna, we need to talk," I announced, my voice steady and commanding. Richard looked up, surprise etched on his face. "Helen, what are you doing here?" "I know about Anna's gambling debts. I know she's planning to use this house to pay them off," I said, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Anna's face contorted into a sneer. "What are you going to do about it, Helen? Cry and run away?" I met her gaze, unwavering. "No, Anna. I'm going to make sure you both pay for what you've done. To me, to this family." Richard's expression faltered, a hint of guilt flashing across his face. "Helen, Save it, Richard. I've heard enough of your excuses. You chose Anna over our marriage. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences." Anna laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you can scare us, Helen? You're nothing. You've always been nothing." Her words were meant to wound, but they only strengthened my resolve. "I may have been nothing to you, but that ends today. I'm taking back control of my life, and I'll start by making sure everyone knows the kind of people you really are." Richard stood up, a mix of anger and desperation in his eyes. "You wouldn't dare. You know how this will look, the scandal, the gossip." I cut him off, my voice cold. "I don't care about the gossip, Richard. I care about justice, about righting the wrongs you and your sister have committed." Anna's face turned pale, her bravado faltering. "You can't prove anything, Helen. It's your word against ours." I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, but I can, Anna. I've been collecting evidence, bank statements, gambling debts, everything. I have more than enough to prove your deceit." Richard's face drained of color. "Helen, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out." I shook my head. "It's too late for talking, Richard. You made your choice, and now you'll have to face the consequences." As I turned to leave, I left them with one final statement. "I'll be filing for divorce, Richard, and I'll make sure the truth about Anna's debts comes out. You've both played this game for far too long. Now, it's my turn. I walked out of the house, the sound of their panicked voices fading behind me. I had stepped into the battle, fully armed and ready. The game of deceit and betrayal they had been playing was over. It was time for retribution, and I was going to make sure they paid for every tear, every moment of suffering they had caused. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and covert planning. My lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Diane, was a beacon of support, guiding me through the labyrinth of divorce proceedings. The day of the confrontation arrived like a storm. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart racing with a mix of dread and determination. Richard and Anna were already there, their faces masks of feigned innocence. As we were called in, I took a deep breath, readying myself for the battle ahead. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the fiery emotions brewing inside me. Richard's lawyer was the first to speak, painting a picture of a harmonious marriage disrupted by my sudden and unreasonable demands. I listened, my fists clenched, as he spun lies as easily as a spider weaves its web. Then it was Diane's turn. She began methodically, laying out the facts with precision. Your Honor, the reality is starkly different from what has been presented by the defense. We have evidence of financial misconduct and emotional abuse, all perpetrated by Mr. Richard Davis and his sister, Ms. Anna Davis. Anna's eyes widened, her composure slipping. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his gaze avoiding mine. Diane continued, her voice steady and clear. We have bank statements showing large sums transferred to Miss Davis's account, coinciding with her gambling debts. We also have testimonies from witnesses who have observed the emotional abuse my client suffered in her marriage. Richard's lawyer tried to interject, but Diane was unyielding. Furthermore, we have evidence of a plan to sell the marital home without my client's consent to cover Ms. Davis's debts. The judge looked over the documents Diane presented, his expression growing increasingly stern. Anna squirmed in her seat, her earlier arrogance replaced by a growing sense of panic. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. I was called to the stand, my heart pounding in my chest. I recounted the years of neglect, the emotional turmoil, and the final straw that broke the camel's back. Their plan to usurp my home. As I spoke, I kept my eyes on Richard and Anna. Richard's face was a picture of defeat, his eyes hollow and resigned. Anna, on the other hand, was seething, her hands clenched into tight fists. The judge finally spoke, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that there has been significant wrongdoing on the part of Mr. Davis and Ms. Davis. I am inclined to grant the divorce and rule in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Helen Davis. Anna erupted, her voice shrill with anger. This is nonsense. She's lying, all of it. Helen's just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy. Her outburst only served to cement the judge's decision. Order in the court, Miss Davis. Your behavior is only proving the plaintiff's point. I will not tolerate any more outbursts. The gavel came down, and with it, the final blow to Richard and Anna's facade. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth had prevailed, and karma had served its course. The fallout from the courtroom was swift and unforgiving. News of Richard and Anna's deceit and the divorce spread through our social circles like wildfire. I watched, with a sense of detached vindication, as their reputations crumbled under the weight of their actions. Richard, once a respected businessman, found his clients and associates distancing themselves. Anna, too, faced her own downfall. The gambling dens she frequented now turned her away, her debts too high and her backers too few. But the true retribution came in the form of their parents' intervention. Mia's grandparents, having witnessed the extent of their children's misdeeds, took decisive action. They cut Anna off financially, a move that left her reeling and desperate. I met with Mia's grandparents a few days after the trial. They welcomed me with a warmth that was tinged with sadness. We should have seen it, Helen, Mia's grandmother lamented. We turned a blind eye for too long. Mia's grandfather nodded in agreement. We're taking responsibility now. Anna will have to learn to fend for herself. And as for Richard, he needs to understand the consequences of his choices. Their resolve was a balm to my wounded heart. They, too, had been victims of Richard and Anna's manipulation, and now they stood with me in seeking justice. The next chapter of retribution unfolded at the final divorce settlement meeting. Richard sat across from me, a shadow of the man he once was. His eyes were hollow, his defiance replaced by a quiet resignation. As the terms were laid out, I could see the realization dawn on him. He was losing everything. His home, a significant portion of his assets, and any semblance of dignity he had clung to. Anna, not present at the meeting, was dealt her blow through legal channels. She was required to undertake a debt repayment plan, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. As I signed the final papers, a sense of closure washed over me. I had come out of this battle scarred but victorious. Richard and Anna had been brought to justice, not just by the law, but by the karma of their own making. Leaving the meeting, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I was free from the chains of a loveless marriage, free from the suffocating grip of Richard and Anna's deceit. I had lost much in this fight, but I had gained something far more valuable, my freedom and a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt a smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a woman who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to walking it. The days following the divorce were a mix of relief and rediscovery. I had stepped out of the shadow of my marriage, and now the world seemed different, more vibrant, and filled with possibilities. One afternoon, I found myself in a quaint bookstore, a place I had often passed but never entered during my marriage. As I browsed through the shelves, I felt a sense of peace. It was in these small moments I realized that life began to regain its color. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked Mia, her face brightening as she saw me. "Helen!" she exclaimed, rushing over. "I heard about the divorce being finalized. Are you okay?" I smiled, embracing her warmly. "I'm more than okay, Mia. I feel like I've been given a new lease on life." Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "I'm so happy for you, and I'm sorry for everything my mom and uncle put you through." "It's not your fault, Mia. You've been one of the few lights in my life these past few years," I reassured her. We sat down in a cozy corner of the bookstore, sipping tea from the little cafe inside. Mia shared her plans for college, her eyes alight with dreams and ambitions. I listened, my heart swelling with pride for the remarkable young woman she had become. Then Mia hesitated, her expression turning serious. "Helen, there's something else. My grandparents, they want to help you. They feel guilty about everything." I shook my head gently. "Mia, they've done enough. Just having their support during the trial meant the world to me." "But they insist. They want to give you a part of the money from the sale of the house. It's only fair," they said. The offer took me aback. Richard and Anna had been forced to sell the house to settle their debts, and now Mia's grandparents wanted to ensure I received my rightful share. After some thought, I accepted. Not for the money, but to honor the gesture of goodwill and closure from two people who had become like family to me. With this unexpected financial security, I began to rebuild my life. I found a small but charming apartment, decorated it to my taste, and for the first time, made a space that was truly mine. I also rekindled old friendships, ones that had dwindled under the weight of my unhappy marriage. My friends welcomed me back with open arms, their support a testament to the enduring nature of true friendship. As for Richard and Anna, they faded into the background of my life. Richard had moved to a different city, a shadow of his former self, and Anna, burdened by her debts and the loss of her family's support, had become a mere footnote in my story. One sunny afternoon, as I walked through the park, I realized something profound. In seeking revenge and justice, I had found something far more important: my own strength and resilience. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with pain and confrontation, but it had led me to a place of self-discovery and empowerment. I saw couples walking hand in hand, children laughing as they played, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a pang of sadness or loss. I was content, at peace with my past and optimistic about my future. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. The road to retribution had been paved with challenges, but it had also brought unexpected blessings. Friendships rekindled, a new sense of purpose, and a deeper understanding of my own resilience. I left the park with a light heart ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. The chapter of Richard and Anna was closed, but my story was far from over. It was a new beginning, a new chapter filled with hope, possibilities, and a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life.